So hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is the second part of the story, what if Naruto and Sasuke gain memories of their past. If you guys enjoy this what if and want more, comment down below to let me know. The comments on videos really help me out a lot. They motivate me to upload more frequently, so please do comment down below. Before I start, please do support for more awesome contents and leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And share this video with your friends and also check out the descriptions and check out the playlists. With that out of the way, let's start. Sasuke climbed out of bed at the crack of dawn and poked Naruto in the ribs, earning himself an angry grunt, which the Uchiha was sure translated to something like "Get lost, I need my beauty sleep." The Uchiha sighed and poked the blonde again. "Out of the bed with you, Obito. We have training to get trough." And's not staring till sen. The blonde muttered out, this time in a more comprehensive manner, but only sleekly. Sasuke rolled his eyes. Kakashi has no idea who we are. Or were. Whichever, cause it's hard to make the difference between past and present identity, nowadays. What does Thavita do wanning? He shifted in bed and buried himself deeper in blankets. What does that have to do with anything? Sasuke demanded, annoyed at his brother's blatant ignorance of their situation. Breath. Calm down. He told himself. It's too early in the morning to burn down anything. It means we have a few hundreds of years of mess to clean up. It means there's a madman to stop from succeeding with the Shinju's revival. And kami forbid, if the bastard succeeds, we will have to fight her. So I think we need training, because neither of us are on such level. You can't use Verona, because you only have Kurama here, but you can't even form Senju and I can't hope to even summon a skeletal Susanoo, much less the full body version. In short, we are like babies against her and Autumn-sama and Homura Oji-sama Renathier, nor will they be here to deal with her. Naruto huffed and sat up. So much for sleep, but then again, shinobi sleep in their graves, huh? Why no, that doesn't work for us, either. He glared at the Uchiha. Sasuke shrugged. If we let her win, you won't have to be worried about another possible reincarnation, because there will not be even a world for us to reincarnate into, and you know it. Naruto grunted. I hate when you are right, and plus ama. With that, he navigated to the kitchen with half-open eyes, while Sasuke went to wash and dress. When Kakashi arrived at their newly claimed training ground, his two students were already there. And they weren't just here, they were already fighting. They were fast for newly graduated genin and he could see, as they strategized, trying to outmaneuver the other. Sasuke was nimble, trying to use the Sharingan's abilities to predict Naruto and plan several steps ahead. His style was wilder, more aggressive. Naruto seemed to come up with things on the fly, but no, there was a pattern there. Although he did try to adapt to Sasuke's own slight changes and tricks. Naruto's style was also fast, but it was based more on stamina and defense. It reminded Kakashi more of the Uzumaki style of Taijutsu, rather than Minato-sensei's fast-paced plan 3 steps ahead in the different situations kind of strikes. Sasuke smirked and a kick hit Naruto in the shoulder. Kakashi winced under his mask as the blonde went flying. But before the impact, the Uzumaki still managed to shift a bit, so he got the least possible damage out of the landing. Kakashi sighed in relief. For a moment, he stopped to think and asked himself where had one of the academy's weakest students learned to fall in such a way. You had to learn to fall, too. Every shinobi did if they wanted to stay on the field for more than a few years. But that wasn't a trick the academy taught overly well. It was something, as their Jinin sensei should have taught them. Naruto spit out some blood and wiped his chin, looking at Sasuke, who stood a few feet away, obviously analyzing the situation. Nice hit and plus ama, but you know what people say to things like this? Sasuke raised an eyebrow, his face mostly remaining unchanged, but Kakashi saw as he instinctively slipped into a defensive stance. No. What do they say? Payback's a bitch. He said, and Kakashi saw as the blonde gathered chakra into his fist, causing a soft glow of blue to appear around it before he slammed it onto the ground. The hit tore up the ground and some of the uncontrolled chakra lashed out, causing even more damage. Sasuke went flying and Kakashi cursed as he too channeled chakra into his souls and leapt back. So Naruto did truly study Tsunade-sama's fighting style and he was trying to imitate it. Imitate the Shodain Tsunade-sama, to be precise, as he had heard that the Sannin had changed her grandfather's fighting style to fit her better. And he was getting with it somewhere, but it was not perfect. Naruto's chakra control wasn't as good as he would need it to be. Note to self, get the advanced chakra control exercises from the Anbu medics. Rakan owes me one anyway. Sasuke cursed and Kakashi moved. A quick shunshin later, he was there to catch his student, but the force of the impact sent both of them tumbling onto the ground. Kakashi groaned as he sat up. Sasuke was sprawled next to him. Are you alright, Sasuke? He asked, concern sneaking into his voice. The Uchiha huffed and slowly sat up. Yes. He grinned. Gods, Naruto needs more chakra control. Kakashi was about to voice his agreement when he noticed how Sasuke looked. He didn't seem tired per se, but his clothes were sweaty and pretty battered. The uchiha stood up and offered a hand to help him up. Kakashi blinked in surprise. He hadn't expected Sasuke to extend a helping hand and stood with his student's help. "Hey, are you two alright?" Naruto asked, concern flickering off his violet eyes. "Yes, we are," Kakashi said, noting that Naruto looked just as bad as Sasuke. Now he was sure it hadn't just been the warm-up spar they'd started 10 minutes ago. "Naruto," Kakashi called sternly. He wasn't a medic, but he knew that enhancing one's blows with chakra was dangerous if they didn't have the necessary chakra control, and it was obvious that Naruto wasn't there yet. "Yes, sensei." The haunting Uzumaki eyes landed on him. Looking into them, Kakashi felt like he was facing a grown man instead of facing Ajinen. Oh, how he hated the village in this moment. To force boys like Naruto and Sasuke to grow up much faster than needed. "You are forbidden from using that technique." Naruto's eyes went wide. "But..." Kakashi raised a hand, silencing the blonde with a look. "If you use chakra-enhanced strength without the proper control, it's dangerous for you and your sparring partner as well. It's commendable that you are trying to honor your Senju heritage by picking up Hashirama-sama's style." Here, the boys looked at each other, Sasuke even snorting a bit, and Kakashi had a feeling the two were laughing at him in the privacy of their minds, but it's more harm than good without proper chakra control. "Now I'm not one against you honoring your heritage, so I wouldn't tell you to use a different style. Instead, use Itless for now. I'll be sure to bring a few advanced exercises that the medics use to practice and keep their control in check. If you master those, your control should be good enough, despite your ridiculously large reserves, to use blows like the last one." Naruto grinned and nodded. "I like the idea." Kakashi hummed, satisfied that the blonde was willing to listen. He was much more calmer than Kakashi thought he'd be. He was a happy spirit, filled with optimism, like his mother, but calm and calculating when need be, just like his father. In short, a kind of person whom was a joy to teach, even if he needed a bit more time. His eye trailed over both of them, and he gave Sasuke a sharp look, knowing that Naruto would just brush his questions off. "How long have you been here?" before he arrived. Sasuke shared a quick look with the Senju Uzumaki before giving a small shrug. "We started an hour ago." Kakashi almost doubled over. If they'd been here at 6, they had to wake up at about 5. Kakashi shivered. He hated waking up so early. Of course, there were times when he woke at such time, and there were times when he was already working when the clock hit 5, but that was the life of an Anbu. Waking up early was the only thing Kakashi had hated about being an Anbu. To think Genin would sacrifice sleep children of bed sleeping, from what he knew, for extra training, was a new concept. Why would they do it? He glanced at both. Why would you be so determined to train? The boys shared another look and Kakashi had a feeling that they had an entire conversation with that look. An entire conversation which he wasn't privy to. He had yet to meet Genin children who were this close to one another. "Being a shinobi is a responsibility," Naruto said, his voice serious. "A responsibility that cannot be taken lightly. And we need to be skilled," Sasuke continued, "powerful and responsible too if we want our dreams to come true." Kakashi stood there, gazing at the boys, needing a moment to process what he'd heard. These two that stood before him weren't children, and it had been his mistake to treat them as such. These two were like grown men, aware of what life had in store for them, good and bad alike. Well, it seemed he had gotten lucky. Kurenai, Asuma and the other senseis all bitched about bratty kids who thought the life of shinobi to be a game, full of glitter and glory. Kids who needed a reality check. At least, Naruto and Sasuke were aware of what was waiting for them outside these gates and were willing to give sweat and blood to survive once there. Kakashi sighed. "It seems I'd underestimated your drive and willingness to sacrifice things to be true shinobi. You are the good students the others would kill for. In this case, let me be a good sensei. Yamato and I will work on a training schedule for you which will help you improve your skills and teamwork. We will work to help you to improve the best ways and in the shortest amount of time possible." They nodded, excitement and curiosity shining in their eyes. They seemed pleased with his words. "I think we can work with that," Sasuke said at last with a small nod. Kakashi hummed. "I thought so. But this means no extra secret training," he said, giving them pointed glares. "I want to know about every kunai you throw from now on. If I or Yamato say that it's time to take a break, you take a break. If we say you run another lap, you run another lap without a skingui. Is that clear?" "Hi, sensei," they answered, their lips curling upwards. They were really the strangest kids he'd ever met. He'd just told them they'd be ran to the ground in the future, and they were happy about it. "Now," the dog summoner murmured, "let's have a look at any injuries you might have before we do anything else." It was at the end of their first week as Team 13 when Yamato joined them on the training ground just after the usual midday break. "Boys, come here for a second," Kakashi called after he was done with the friendly small talk. The two closed their bentos and walked over. Sasuke raised an eyebrow as he saw Yamato and Naruto immediately lit up like a miniature sun. Those two were so different. Sasuke was quiet and solitary most of the time, reserved even when showing his brotherly affection to Naruto. Naruto on the other hand was bright, friendly and excitable, sometimes even clingy. Mostly clingy toward Sasuke, which sometimes seemed to annoy the Uchiha. Yet, for some odd reason, Sasuke never acted on that annoyance outright, only teased Naruto afterwards. Seriously, if Kakashi would have needed to use a comparison, he would have called Sasuke the moon and Naruto the sun. Always together, unable to exist without the other, creating a harmony trough their polar opposition. An odd pair, yes, but he could not see them any other way, just side by side. "Boys, this is Tora." Sasuke nodded in greeting, a small grin on his face. "Pleased to meet you. Tora-san," Naruto shouted, hurrying over to hug Yamato. Yamato blinked in shock, looking down at Naruto, then back at him. Kakashi chuckled. "He did the same to me," he admitted quietly. Yamato smiled and patted Naruto on the head, obviously unsure how to deal with the excitable blonde. After a minute, Naruto released Yamato and took a few steps back to stand next to Sasuke. Hell. Now that Kakashi looked at them really looked with the previous comparison in mind, even their colors were opposites. Naruto's golden blonde hair was like the sun and his bright violet eyes, with shades of blue, if the light was just right, like the early morning sky, while Sasuke's dark colors reminded Kakashi of various parts of the night. Yamato smiled. "So you remember me?" Sasuke gave a small hum. "Naruto's even better at sensory than I am, but you have a memorable signature, you know. I only feel that from Naruto." Yamato nodded in understanding. "Hokage-sama told me and no Naruto-kun, I'm not a senju, unlike you. How I've come to have the Mokuton has astery. Astery for another time, if you don't mind." The boys shared a look and then nodded. "We won't judge if you decide to share." Sasuke muttered, "We all have demons to deal with and regrets to live with. Things we wish hadn't happened, yet cannot be changed. Things we wish could come undone, yet it will never be." Naruto said, as the boys' gazes met for a second. "So, we just live with what we have, trying to make the best out of it." Not for the first time since the boys had become his students, Kakashi had a feeling that there was more behind those words than the story of a massacre survivor and an ostracized Jinchuriki. As he shared a look with Yamato, Kakashi couldn't help but ponder what that story might be. Sasuke crouched on the branch, his sharingan burning, as he waited for their target to arrive. "This is Inu here. The voice came trough the walkie-talkie. Are you in position?" "Or in position." A second voice answered. Even trough the line, Sasuke could tell the man was annoyed. For the past 20 minutes, they tried finish this, but to no avail. This little otherworldly monster dodged even the two Jimin. How it managed, Sasuke would never understand. "Asura in position." His brother's voice answered. "Chase the little monster towards me." Sasuke snorted a bit before giving his own report. "Indra in position and I see the target." "Perfect." Tora said. "Ready go." Sasuke leapt from his tree with chakra just as Yamato gave the sign. As the Hellcat saw him, it hissed and leapt into another direction. Even before it could escape, Kakashi and Yamato both revealed themselves, blocking another paths of escape. The little beast nimbly evaded them all. This was so embarrassing. He'd been called the third strongest person at the dawn of ninja and the cat was toying with him. Bolting straight for their fourth member. Suddenly and most importantly before the cat could do anything, golden chains broke the surface of the ground, binding the little beast in place. It yowled, trying to get away, and much to Sasuke's and all of the team's, in fact, eternal glee, it failed. Naruto laughed as he came from his hiding spot. "Trash all you want, little monster. Those chains held kicked for decades. You will not break them." Yamato stopped next to him and looked at Naruto. "So, Naruto. Another practice. Use your Mokuton to calm the cat." Naruto muttered something about the cat not deserving such kindness, very uncharacteristic of him, but Sasuke did agree and sat in front of the cat, out of the reach of its claws. Sasuke wondered if those sharp things were made of adamantine, for when the monster had caught him in the first few minutes, it surely felt like when Naruto's chains cut his skin. Naruto flared his chakra carefully. Kakashi had kept his promise and he'd brought some advanced control exercises, which Naruto practiced every day for hours, with the help of a few shadow clones. Yamato had also helped Naruto get better control of the Mokuton. Honestly, Sasuke thought that most of this mess they were in, training-wise, could be avoided if only the two men knew who they were, but no. They would be called mad or who knows what else. When the cat finally calmed down, Naruto grinned. Team 13 stood in the Hokage's office, having just reported to Susus of their capture Tora mission and giving the poor cat back to its owner. Naruto, being Naruto, had taken pity on the hellish feline and instead of letting the fire daimyo's wife walk out, he stopped the woman and explained to her how she should handle the cat. The daimyo's wife smiled brightly at the blonde as she saw her precious Tora calm down and purring in her arms. "Tell me your name, son." The woman smiled. "I would definitely have a word with your parents over how wonderful child they have." Naruto smiled sadly. "The name's Senju Uzumaki Naruto, ma'am. My parents were Uzumaki Kushina and Senju Namikaze Minato, but as you know, they are dead." The woman seemed taken aback. "Oh my. Of course I know what happened. I'm sorry for bringing it up. And I didn't know the Yondaime had been a Senju." Naruto shook his head. "He hadn't known either, from my understanding. And you couldn't have known who I was, so no harm done." The woman brought Naruto into an unexpected hug. A minute later she pulled away. "Well, you did me a great favor with Tora-chan, and we owe a lot to your parents. If not for them, Konoha wouldn't be. Such things are not forgotten in the capital either. Should you need assistance with something, have the Hokage write me, Naruto-kun." Naruto gave the woman a charming smile as she placed the mission payment right into his hands. He bowed to her. "Arigato, Madam Shijimi." As the happy woman left, everyone stared wide-eyed at the blonde. Naruto looked confused at all the disbelieving stares the Hokage, his senseis and the other workers were giving him. "What?" Sasuke snorted and then actually burst into laughter, surprising many. "Not even Yakin Bathatans, Obito." Naruto scowled and glared. "You're being mean again, and plus Sama and I didn't even know what's your problem." Sasuke shook his head, regaining his composure, but amusement shone in his charcoal eyes. "Naive Obito. Grow up a bit if you ever want to walk in Senju footsteps, nah. That was the daimyo's wife and she just gave you a free favor. Guessing by it, that favor goes not only to her, but to the daimyo himself." Naruto looked sheepish as he scratched the back of his neck, reminding many of the older shinobi present of the Yondaime. Hey hoopsie." Sasuke groaned. "How?" He groaned in exasperation again, looking at the ceiling. "How in the name of the Rikiden can you be me brother?" A female Anbu squealed. "Naruto-kun is a naive kawaii cinnamon roll from the shadows, earning herself a sharingan glare from the present Uchiha." Many present wondered what had become of the world if a Senju Uzumaki and an Uchiha openly called one another brothers, the younger even being formal. Where all the village could hear. Kakashi turned away, looking at the Hokage, trying to be the saving grace of the team. "Excuse their antics, Hokage-sama. I would be requesting a higher ranked mission, as I believe they are both ready." The Hokage seemed thoughtful for a moment before nodding. "I believe you, Kakashi. Call the client." The elderly leader said, raising his voice. 2 minutes later an elderly man walked in with short gray hair, wearing glasses. He wore a sleeveless V-neck shirt with an obi, pants and a pair of sandals. He also had a pointed hat and a white towel around his neck. There was a liqueur bottle in his hand. Naruto wrinkled his nose at the penetrating smell of sake coming from the man. "I'm Tazuna, the master bridge builder from the land of waves. Where are the ninja I've hired?" "These shinobi will escort you home, Tazuna-san," the Hokage said, pointing at Team 13. Tazin seemed pleased for a second, but then his dark eyes landed on Naruto and Sasuke. "Children? Children will be protecting me? That blonde midget? Children who are capable of Maminju." Sasuke growled, his eyes flashing with the sharingan in a silent treat. "Say a bad word about my brother drunk and you will regret it." Now, Sasuke. "No threatening the client, please," Yamato said, putting a hand on the Uchiha's tense shoulder. Said Uchiha just scowled as Kakashi gave them the orders to be ready tomorrow morning. Sasuke's eyes wandered around the surroundings, searching for any sign of bandits. Just before they'd left the village Naruto told him that he had a bad feeling about this mission. He had felt Tazuna's unstable emotions the day before, however he couldn't tell if they were because of the man being drunk or because he was trying to hide something. So, now both of them were tense, expecting the unexpected, as a shinobi should. They just barely crossed the tree line when Naruto signed him. It wasn't Anbu sign language that their teachers could read. Instead, it was the old childish sing language from their first life. Or, Naruto signed, eyes flickering to the side. Sasuke understood. After Shiro's D and the activation of his sharingan, Bor was their synonym for danger. Sasuke's own eyes wandered about and he soon spotted the puddle by the side of the road. He sensed the chakra pooled their illusion. Still, he walked past, pretending to have not noticed it. There were 2 ninja hiding under the illusion and their chakra levels were just a bit higher than his. They just barely passed the puddle when the genjutsu dispersed and the enemy jumped out. Chains rattled and they sent the heavy metal flying towards Kakashi. The 2 genin didn't move. Kakashi was gone in a well-timed kawarimi. 1 down. The shorter of the 2 masked shinobi declared. Well, to be precise, those weren't masks they wore, but rebreathers. They wore kiri headbands. One of the claws were detached, and the second, who still had it on his hand, sent it flying with ink. Yamato was gone too, but Sasuke wasn't too worried. Two down. The second declared smugly. Naruto raised his hand and a ram seal and chakra chains formed around Tazuna, enclosing the bridge builder in a protective bubble of gold and blue. Not having to worry about a stray weapon hitting the civilian, Sasuke grabbed Akunai and charged it with lightning chakra. As the two assaulted them, Sasuke dodged the first strike, using the kunai to snap the chain connecting the two enemy shinobi. As he hurriedly turned, he saw that Naruto had already engaged the other in a fierce clash of taijutsu. "You're mine," Sasuke said, sharingan already burning, as he attacked the taller man. The man slashed at his face, and Sasuke dodged, crouching down to sweep the man's legs from under him. The enemy jumped over it and slashed out with his metal claw. The uchiha leant back to avoid it and then shifted, slashing out with the chakra-charged kunai. The weapon hit right into the Kirinin's shoulder. Blood splashed forth and the dark eyes narrowed as blood stained the already dark clothing even darker. N+N. Someone called, but Sasuke froze as some of the enemy's blood landed on his hands. And, as the three tomo in his eyes spun, for a moment, Sasuke was elsewhere, thinking a different battle. The terrain around them was nothing but charred ruins by now. All traces of life had long disappeared. The animals had fled during the first few clashes, and the more jutsu they aimed at one another, the more they damaged the surrounding flora. Not that Indra cared too much for the flora and fauna of the place. He snarled as he saw Asura stand up. The big's chakra had faded a while ago, only leaving a small shimmer of gold around the younger's body. Indra himself was getting more and more tired. The fight had been going on for hours, and Asura was still clinging to power, still clinging to consciousness well enough to fend off the strikes meant to kill. "Time to finish this," he growled, tightening his hold on his katana as he leapt forwards. Asura met him and matched him strike for strike. In fact, he was slowly getting the upper hand as his strikes had more strength behind them. Metal scraped on metal as he yanked his blade away, instinctively channeling lightning chakra Trophed. Asura's own weapon glowed green with wind chakra, and as the weapons met, he felt more and more resistance. But then there was a moment of lapse, a misstep in his brother's moves, and that was all Indra needed. He channeled more of his chakra into the blade, making it crackle with small blue-purple lightning, and thirsted forwards. Blood gushed from the wound, tainting Asura's white garments a bright crimson. Blood splashed onto his own white kimono and onto his hand. But, before he could feel triumphant that he had finally won that with Asura gone, he could finally have what was meant to be his, he felt Asura's body jolt from the force of his lightning, and then, pain. Sharp, shredding pain as if something tore at his insides. He looked down and saw that with the last ounce of his strength, Asura drove his wind-coated blade trough his side. Blood pulsed from the wound, with every beat of his heart, tainting his own clothing, just like his brother's. Indra tore his gaze from his wound and looked at his brother. Asura's dark brown eyes were dark and hard, yet still pleading. N+Ama Asura rasped out. "You promised." Indra's eyes went wide and he looked down. His hand was red and sticky with blood, still wrapped around the tsuba of his katana. Blood. His hands were red with blood. His brother's blood. Asura's blood. His hands were tainted with his most hated, most beloved brother's blood. Kinslayer, a sinister voice sneered in his mind. For a brief moment, panic took hold of him as the weight of their actions finally hit him with the force of a godandama. Asura was dying because of him. His brother. They had made up, hadn't they? They were now together again, side by side, right? And he had killed his brother. No, Asura. No, no, no. Sasuke. And then someone slapped him. Sasuke jolted back to reality, his sharingan fading, and he found himself face to face with Naruto. There was blood on the blonde, and Sasuke's own hands were bloody. No. Wide-eyed, he staggered back from Naruto. "No," he rasped, barely able to breath. "I hadn't, I didn't, we promised," he choked, shaking. "Sasuke, look at me," Naruto said, his voice steely and gentle at the same time. Slowly, Sasuke looked at the other. Black met violet. "You're on the border of Nami and Hai no Kuni. With Yamato, Kakashi, Tazuna and me. Can you follow?" Sasuke tried settling all that he know forest on the border of So no Kuni. Not miles away from where once the Otatsuki compound stood, which he had burned down. "I'm here, and plus dot." Sasuke took a small breath and then another. Then another. 1, 2, 3 slowly, he got his bearings and felt Naruto's warm chakra wrap around him, like a blanket. As he calmed down, all the energy seemed to leave his body and he couldn't help but lean into the blonde a bit more. "I'm sorry, Otanto," he murmured. Kinslayer never wanted to be. "Hush, now," Asura murmured. "I'm here. It wasn't me. It wasn't my blood. You stopped an enemy from hurting, was not me." Sasuke shuddered with relief. He hadn't broken his promise again. They had made camp instead of pressing forwards. What little remained of the journey would be done tomorrow. Sasuke was still shaken and unable to focus, so most of the camp making had been Naruto's doing, or rather, the work of his clones. The Senju Uzumaki refused to leave his best friend and brother alone. Not after such a thing. He didn't know what exactly had Sasuke seen, but it wasn't needed. He understood that the situation had for some reason brought forth the Uchiha's bloodier memories of their clashes, coupled with his guilt. Now, with the camp done and food cooking over the fire, the 5 of them were sitting around the fire. Or more like 4 of them sitting, with Sasuke sleeping in his bedroll, also to make sure his brother would not wake screaming. Naruto remained close. Even asleep, Sasuke would feel his presence just enough to keep him calm. For now, that was what mattered. What had happened out there? Tazuna asked, his eyes flickering to Sasuke. Naruto huffed. His family have a special ability in their eyes. The sharingan. If active, the sharingan gives the user eidetic memory. Sasuke had some unpleasant memories from his past, which re-triggered in the fight. He ended up with a panic attack. The memory was probably from the worst ones, as he hadn't had such a thing in years. Years? Kakashi murmured, looking at him with shock. He has panic attacks and we don't know about it. Naruto grunted, shaking his head. It only happened thrice, not counting this one. I could always pull him trough them. He drinks his little tea for a few nights, so I can sleep too, cause right now, it's my chakra that keeps him calm, and then we can both rest. He'll bounce back in a week. He said something about a promise, hadn't he? Yamato said. Naruto grunted. Yes. Both of his sensei's eyes landed on him. And I think I heard him say something about kinslaying. Naruto grit his teeth. He knew that Sasuke had meant that message to him. That he had never wanted to kill him the first time around. Of course, Kakashi and Yamato knew nothing of the reincarnation, and it wasn't something he could bring up, as if they were chatting about the weir. Naruto. Kakashi called, a bit more sternly. What did Sasuke mean, when? Enough. He growled, narrowing his eyes on the older shinobi. It's between me and Sasuke. This happened before and I can deal with it. Just don't ask him questions tomorrow, because those will bring back the memories. We don't need him panicking on the field. He will either freeze down and get himself killed or get mad and burn something or someone he shouldn't. He sighed and settled onto his own bedroll, close to the Uchiha. I will talk with him about it and we will get trough, like always. Together. We're here to help, Naruto. Kakashi said. His tone was calm, matter of fact, but there was also an undertone of pleading. Kakashi was pleading with him to trust them. But for the first time in many years, Naruto wasn't sure he could trust his most beloved Anbu. We'll deal with it. He said gruffly, before turning his back to the men. Oyasumi. As he closed his eyes, he felt his teacher's disappointment and it tore him apart to keep secrets from the unofficial members of his family. But he had no choice. This was between him and Indra. He had to make Indra trust him again, as much as he had to make the older trust themselves again. They could only count on each other, just like when they'd been children, with a bijk for siblings. A short trek from their camp to the border of Nami, where Tazuna said that someone would pick them up and carry them across, was spent in silence. Sasuke was still a bit shaken from yesterday, and Naruto wasn't in agitated mood either, worried about his brother, while also keeping an eye on any possible danger. Kakashi and Yamato were predictably both worried about their students, however they didn't voice it. Naruto's sharp words from the night before prevented them from saying anything, as they didn't want to distract and thus, possibly endanger the two boys. When they arrived at the shore, an old man was waiting for them with a boat, just as Tazuna had promised. Despite the change in mission parameters from a simple C rank to AB rank, possibly A, as there may be other missing men, they still decided to continue. It had taken a lot of convincing on Naruto and Sasuke's parts, especially Sasuke's part, as he had been the one to freeze up, but in the end it worked. Now, as they settled in the small boat, they were all on the edge. After the demon brothers had failed, they expected someone else, but so far nothing had happened. Now, they were almost in Nami and Naruto's senses tingled. It was hard to see anything from the mist, but his sensory was all he needed. He took out a kunai and sent it flying into the bushes. It was a white rabbit. Down. Yamato and Kakashi called at once as the silver-haired man tackled their client to the floor. Naruto watched as Agent Cleaver flew above their heads to embed in the bark of a large tree. Then, a man jumped onto the hilt of the giant blade, radiating killing intent. The man was tall and noticeably muscular, with light grayish skin, short spiky black hair, dark brown eyes, and small eyebrows. He was wearing bandages like a mask over the bottom half of his face. He wore his Kiri forehead protector sideways on his head. He was shirtless, with his chest only covered by a large belt. Lamachi's abuser. Kakashi said as he stood up, the Krigakur no Kijin missing nin, hunted for attempting to assassinate the Mizukage. Zabuza growled as his eyes landed on their sensei. Sharingan no over the old bridge builder and you can walk away from here. That's not going to happen, Zabuza. He jumped from the boat and pulled out 2 kunai. Zabuza's chakra spiked again and then he jumped down from the sword and pulled it down. Then he leapt at Kakashi and the two of them clashed. Naruto grit his teeth. Kakashi didn't have a sword of his own, so he was in a bit of a tight spot there. Zabuza's reach was better. Kakashi was faster of course, but they could feel chakra gathering around them. It sent Naruto's senses into an override. "What's this?" he growled. Zabuza's killing intent was nothing compared to what him and Indra kept throwing at each other the first time round, so it didn't hinder them. But the mist. "It's laced with chakra," Sasuke murmured. "I can barely see Trophet." Momochi is one of Thikiri no Shinabigatana Shichinen SHK. He's a master of the silent killing. He uses the chakra-laced mist to hide and confuse his enemies. "The hitting part works," Naruto murmured. "If not for my negative emotion sense, my sensory would be useless." But his bloodlust and excitement give him away. They stayed close to Tazuna, listening to the clashes of blades. "We should help him," Sasuke said. "No. Kakashi can deal with him, besides, we don't know what distractions Zabuza might use to get to Tazuna. He's here to kill a civilian, remember," Yamato said. Naruto grunted. "We can't leave, but I can still help," he said, molding his chakra and then forming a bird seal. Fkton. To top a wind release. Great break trough, he took a deep breath and then exhaled a great gale of wind, which blew away the mist, allowing better sight. The two fighters looked towards the group and Zabuza glared at them. "Brat. You'll pay for that." He made a seal and 2 water clones appeared next to him. Even before Yamato could tell them not to go, both boys leapt onto the water to engage the clones, while Kakashi fought the original Zabuza. Naruto grinned as the water clone swung its sword at him. He dodged the swing and shot chakra chains at the clone to bind it. The chains rattled in protest as the clone struggled against them. Naruto had a hard time keeping the clone in place, but he was nothing if not stubborn. He recalled the seal sequence from the scroll Sasuke had read a few days before departure. "Me. Hitsuji. Seru. Itori." Felt the chakra rise in a warm wave. "Pain. Kitsunebi. Fire release. Foxfire," he murmured as 10 white hot fireballs formed in front of him. He flicked his hand and the 10 balls went flying at the water clone. In normal circumstances, fire was weak against fire, but it was nice to have a chakra like his denser and more than others. He just had to put a bit more chakra into his technique than the clone had. The clone evaporated and as he moved towards Kakashi, he saw Sasuke finish off his own clone. Kakashi was trapped in a big bubble of water. Not good, Naruto thought. He shared a look with Sasuke and they both started running some hand signs from their past life. Jutsu, that supposedly didn't exist in this time. Naruto felt as Sasuke purposefully mixed more of his yin chakra into the fire. Kaiten. Shinku no Han fire release. Crimson flame, as blood red flames appeared. Naruto finished his own set, releasing his compressed chakra. Dawn. Ranked in wind release. Drilling air bullet as he formed the bullets, each one spread the red flames and traveled towards Zabuza and Kakashi like small firestorms. Zabuza cursed as he dodged the volley of balls. One of the balls hit the water prison, evaporating some of the liquid while freeing Kakashi. The boys sped over to their sensei, worried for his well-being. "Kaka-sensei?" Naruto asked as he nudged the haddock. "I'm fine. You were fast," he murmured, his sharingan trailed on Zabuza. "Meddlesome brats." The Kirinin growled as he went off a set of seals. Kakashi did the same, stepping in front of the boys while giving them away, his eyes seemed to say. Sasuke drew farther from their sensei, dragging Naruto with him, much to the displeasure of the blonde. As the long sequence of seals were done, 2 massive water dragons formed, their eyes flashing with sinister light as both launched at one another. Naruto stiffened as he sensed an approaching chakra signature. But even before he could warn his team, a masked shinobi appeared and shot a few senbon at Zabuza. The senbon stuck onto the swordman's neck and then he fell, dead. The dark-haired ninja had the symbol of Kiri on the white mask. "Thank you for catching him. I've been pursuing him for a very long time," the stranger said. As he grabbed Zabuza, the boys helped Kakashi as he seemed weak, then, by the time they turned back, the masked nin was already gone. Kakashi staggered and the boys struggled to keep him upright. "Sensei?" Sasuke called with a raised eyebrow. "Sharingan's tiring. Takes atoll, not uchiha," he muttered before passing out. Naruto cursed under his breath as he looked at Yamato and the still shaking Tazuna. After a 15-minute walk, with a pair of Naruto's clones carrying the unconscious Kakashi, Team 13 made it to Tazuna's house. "Tsunami, I'm home," Tazuna called as he let the shinobi into the house. A young woman with black hair rushed to greet the elderly carpenter, hugging him for a moment. "TM-san. I'm so glad you're back." Tazuna chuckled and nodded. Yes, it's thanks to these shinobi. As Tazuna mentioned them, the woman turned to them and smiled. Welcome. My name is Tsunami. Good day, Tsunami-san. My name is Yamato. Their sensei said. The unconscious man is my colleague, Hada Kakashi, and the boys are our genin. Uchiha Sasuke and Senju Uzumaki Naruto. Uzumaki? Both civilians asked, looking at Naruto with shock and hope in their eyes. The blonde hummed with a brief smile. Okay-sen was from the main family of the Uzumaki. She escaped the fall. My father was a Senju of Konoha. It's a great joy to know some have escaped. Tsunami said with a wide smile, bowing to him. Well, as the leader of the village, allow me to welcome you to Nami no Kuni, Uzumaki Dono. Thank you and your team for bringing my father home safely. Naruto froze for a second, feeling lost. He stole a quick glance at the conscious members of his team, silently asking for help. Yamato had a vaguely amused expression on his face. Sasuke, his brother on the other hand, was openly smirking in amusement. Quickly focusing on Tsunami, he returned her bow with a briefer one. We were just doing our duty, Tsunami-san. However, you must know that this mission has been misranked. Your father asked our Hokage for AK rank and we came. But with shinobi as opponents, it's an A rank now. Tsunami pursed her lips, looking apologetically at each of them. Gomen Nasai. However, due to the presence of the Gedo Corporation, our land has slowly been bled dry. We could barely save up this money for AK rank. If father does not finish the bridge, Nami will never be free from Gedo and we will be forced to leave or we will starve. Why not rise against him then? Sasuke asked. Tsunami sighed, shaking her head. We've tried once and we failed. Gedo executed my husband, making an example of him. That broke the spirit of our people. Father's bridge is the last hope, but many are skeptical. The members of Team 13 glanced at one another and a silent agreement passed between them. They will help these people. We'll aid you where we can. Sasuke said quietly. For now, however, our sensei would need a place to rest. Naruto said, pointing at the still motionless Kakashi. Tsunami's eyes flashed with worry and she nodded, steering them towards a small room. The same night the team minus Kakashi were having a meal with father and daughter as Tsunami's son had refused to show himself. Naruto helped Tsunami with cooking, even sharing some of the supplies they'd brought along from Konoha. Zabuza is not dead. Hunter Nin are supposed to kill the shinobi they pursued. This masked individual took Zabuza's body instead of dealing with it on the spot. Yamato said after a long stretch of silence between two bites. The two boys froze, whirling about the information in their minds. It's hard to kill with senbon. Sasuke said slowly, earning an approving nod from Yamato. But it can render people unconscious. Naruto said, like a chop to the neck. Yamato hummed, pleased. These two were something else to catch on so fast without any aid. Yes. However, his body had been paralyzed. He needs time to recover from that. Kakashi will also need time, but the recovery from both conditions is about the same time. Kakashi should be mostly fine by the time Zabuza makes a comeback. How long will it take? Sasuke asked curiously. If the medical scroll I've read was accurate, Naruto murmured, a thoughtful expression on his face, it will be about a week. Indeed, Naruto. Yamato said, in the meanwhile, we'll guard Tazuna-san while he works on the bridge and we might as well try to get some training done as well. One of us will stay with Kakashi at the family until he wakes, the other two escorts Tazuna. We will be switching from day to day. Understood sensei. The genin murmured, turning back to their food. It was Sasuke's turn to guard the house when Kakashi woke up. Well, they'd made the agreement the day before and he had volunteered to stay behind. He knew that Yamato and Naruto could handle themselves. Morning sleeping beauty. The Uchiha greeted, leaning against the room's wall, fiddling with his clothes as he watched his sensei stir. Sasuke. Kakashi rasped, what happened? Sasuke gracefully stepped away from his spot and walked over to the small nightstand in the room, which had a cup. He grabbed it and reheated it with some Kaiten chakra, offering it to Kakashi. Drink. Naruto made this from some herbs. Good for pain and exhaustion. Kakashi blinked and took a sip of the tea. Sasuke still couldn't for the dear life of him understand how could the man drink and eat with that goddamn mask in place. It wasn't Ajinjutsu, otherwise his sharingan would have detected it. So how? His eye crinkled into an upside down this is very good. How does Naruto do it? Sasuke shrugged. It's an old recipe, that's all I know. Old being an understatement. He still remembered his time as Indra when their father made them drink this tea as children if they exhausted themselves more than necessary. Most often it happened when he was younger and unmindful in training or when Asura kept running around the forest for too long. Every time that happened, Asura walked out of his room half awake, looking like a dead risen from the grave rather than an actual functioning human being. He'd never learned how to do the tea because Asura had, as herbs were one of the few things that entertained him from a young age. Shame. Maybe he will tell how to make it. Or we can save you some of the herbs we have in Konoha. Sasuke said. We have this mix dried and ready. Remind me of it and I'll give you some. If you drink it in a bigger dose than this, it also works as acidative. Kakashi nodded and took another sip, obviously enjoying the drink. Not that Sasuke had anything against tea, in fact, Helvetia. Especially his brother's specially made herbal teas. Oh, my forget. Zabuza is not dead. Sasuke finished calmly. We know. Naruto and Yamato are out guarding Tazuna. Estate in case you woke up and to make sure the family are safe. Does Yamato have a plan? Kakashi murmured. Sasuke glanced out into the forest, trough the small window the room had. Well, the plan came this morning: take out Gato before Zabuza returns and then perhaps convince Zabuza to leave with his meal ticket gone. Gato surely has some money here taken from the people. Give some to Zabuza and he will be gone. Take the mission pay for Konoha and the rest can go back to the people to restart their economy. The Chunin blinked owlishly for a second, his mind still sluggish from exhaustion. Good plan, I guess. If he gets his money, I'm sure we can convince Zabuza to leave. The team were once more having a meal with the family, discussing the last touches of their plan before setting out in a few hours, a plan that may just restore Nami's peace and order as it should be. That is, until the discussion and the quiet meal were disturbed by the loud scraping of wood on wood. Tsunami's son, Inari, had an angry expression on his face, glaring at the shinobi gathered. Why are you even trying? You'll just fail anyway. Heroes don't exist and Gato is too strong for you. He will win anyway, it will get even worse for us, and you will just die. The child growled. Inari. Tsunami scolded, her tone horror-filled. It was easy to discern that she'd never heard such words from her son before. Shut it, whelp. Sasuke snarled unexpectedly, his eyes glinting sharply as his sharingan spun. You think we don't know the danger? We do. The reason we go. Because what is going on here, ice injustice and injustice has no place in the world. As for dying. He snorted. No. We won't die from the hands of a coward like Gato. These Emil's civilian Enwir who dwell in the shadows, who do what others have no guts to or not strong enough to do. And if you think you were the only one to suffer, you're SRL mistaken. We all have our own demons. Some of us are heroes, literal heroes, keeping entire villages in one piece just by living and breathing, and we get no recognition for it. In fact, we get hated for saving the village. Some of us saved lives and we got ridicule and pity for it. Some of us were trusted with the world and ruined that world instead of building and protecting, and then we're trying to rebuild from the ruins we left. People who we loved and trusted have betrayed us and killed our loved ones. He took a breath here, he stole a meaningful glance at Naruto. Ruins and blood and suffering, that is what life is. He stood up, glaring down at Inari, who shrunk under his gaze. But you stand up, apologize and go on and try to clean the mess you've left. Because if you sit here, crying and wallowing in self-pity, you are no better than the people who have ruined what you held dear. He stopped for a bit and continued in a softer, lower tone, but if possible, his voice sounded 10 times as sinister as before. And if you turn to anger and hate, you will just help ruin the world faster, and before you notice, the hate ruins Yabe and saving, and even the people who loved you will turn their backs because you did not listen when they asked you to reconsider. To return to them and forgive. He strode out, leaving wide-eyed, gaping people behind. Gods. That was the longest time ever they had heard Sasuke speak. Naruto was the first one to snap out of his shock after making sense of all that has been said. He jumped up and leapt after the Uchiha, a touch of panic in his tone as he called after him. N plus Ama. Kakashi and Yamato sat there, frozen, and not for the first time, they wondered what the boys had gone trough to have such sharp, painful weaves on the world. They caught the references in the speech too. Naruto's Jinchuriki status, Itachi whom Sasuke had loved and trusted, killing the clan. There was even a reference to Kakashi's childhood. How could the boys know what happened to his father? And there were other things. Things that neither of the Chunin could make sense of, but obviously had a strong impact on the boys' lives. Naruto only needed a few minutes to find Sasuke. He knew the Uchiha's chakra signature like the back of his hand, so even if Sasuke tried hiding, he would have found him. Although, Sasuke wasn't trying to hide at all. His chakra and emotions were like a raging thunderstorm. Anger, self-loathing, grief, regret, love tainted just by a touch of jealousy, morsel, loathing and regret. Naruto took a deep breath and tried to shut his senses down. Gods, those emotions, the feeling was like being punched by Susanoo without his own chakra avatar in use. Almost completely overwhelming. He didn't even try to hide his approach from his brother. It would be no use. The Uchiha would detect him anyway, they were so used to one another's presence. He sat next to Sasuke, their shoulders touching, and for a moment they watched the silver crescent of the moon. The crescent, Naruto noted, just like their father had used to compare Indra to. Indra, like the moon, and himself, like the sun. Different but similar, never without one another. Then plus Sama, he muttered softly, almost unwilling to break the silence. But they had to speak about this. It seemed, even after remembering and that talk over tea so many years ago, the day when Sasuke escaped the hospital, the sins and missteps of the past haunted his brother and friend relentlessly. "I tried. I'm still trying," Sasuke whispered. His tone was strained and haunted. "I'm trying to be the good one here. Good, like I could not be for the first time. He discarded me because I wasn't good enough, despite being the older, and every drop of hate and anger, which was meant for him, you saw it. You tasted it. You shouldn't have. But everything I felt for him then, you got it. And now I fear that it will start again. That despite everything we've gone through in this life, we would end up the same. Me running and you chasing me, and both of us sting with unvoiced apologies and regrets on our tongues, which would just start this whole reincarnation mess again, and we would just have another life of failure resto try and set right. Only Tofiland be caught in the same destructive loop." Naruto's heart broke. In every single life he had lived, his heart broke. To think that powerful CONFIDENTINDRA Sasuke too, but really, there was no difference between the two. He spoke of the same person with different names, only because they had lived in different eras, had such insecurities. The blonde hugged him close, holding him as tightly as he could to make sure the other will understand that no matter what, he will not live. "It will not happen," he whispered. Voice soft, yet steely, only he had ever managed. "We know our mistakes now. We won't make them again. We stand in this together, side by side. And just let it go. Let the old hurt go. It's just the two of us now. Sama is no longer here. You have nothing to prove to him anymore, and I didn't have to fear failing him again." Sasuke's black eyes found him so fast that Naruto thought it humanly impossible. "You? Failing him?" Disbelief dripped from his tone. "Never. You were the perfect." "I wasn't," Naruto murmured. "I promised him we would be together again on his deathbed. Side by dot." This time it was Sasuke who hugged Naruto close. "I tried being the good son. The responsible one, so you would never have to know pain and loneliness. Because those who stand on the top are always lonely. He was too, in a way. He never found anyone after Sama died, after you were born." Naruto's heart twisted. Even in his life as Asura, he had never known his mother. But he had had a loving father and brother, but no one had ever spoken of his mother. No one dared, not even Indra, no matter how small, trivial and happy his broers' memories were of their mother. Not even her name had been spoken. "We tried being good and tried to do the good thing alone, to shield each other." The blonde murmured, putting some distance between them. "We tried protecting each other alone, without the other's consent, because we thought it was our responsibility, as a brother." Sasuke hummed and gave Antony nod. Naruto reached into his hip pouch and took out a kunai. The sharp metal glinted in the silvery moonlight. He pressed the blade against his right palm, making a small cut, drawing blood. His eyes found Sasuke as he offered the blade. "It was our blood that started this mess. Let it be our blood that ends it. None of our children and grandchildren shall ever know the pain we had." Sasuke cut his own palm, his left one, in a similar manner. "It was our pride, love and anger that started this. Shall our love and care for each other be the end of it?" They joined hands, looking at one another. "I swear by the wicked man, by the Shinju, never to lay a harming hand on you again. Earth and moon are our witness, we stand side by side, as brothers again." As their voices faded, they smited each other and hugged one another. That was the night when the two truly broke the chain of hatred linking their families. That was the night when the bloody rivalry of Uchiha and Senju would forever end. Then they stood up and slowly made their way back to the house. Later night, Naruto, Sasuke and Yamato made their way over to Gato's hideout. Kakashi was better, but still not fully recovered, so it was decided that he should stay behind and, if the need arose, deal with any unwanted mess directly in the village. Gato's base of operations was just outside of the village, guarded by a small army of thugs. The three shinobi stopped in the shadows, observing the place. The boys both had their sensory stretched out to the fullest, so they could count the people inside. All of them had low chakra levels, barely more than a civilian. 3 guarding this door. 2 behind the building, and I can feel about 15 inside," Naruto said. Yamato raised a curious eyebrow. "How can you tell so accurately if they have so low levels?" Naruto grinned confidently. "It's a secret." Sasuke rolled his eyes. Those antics of Asura would never change, no matter what time and life they were in, and made a gesture to go inside before Yamato could probe further. Their sensei decided to go after Gato himself while leaving them to deal with the thugs. Once Yamato disappeared in the shadows, they shared a look. "Child's play." They walked out of their hiding spot side by side, slowly, letting the men notice them. Both thugs noticed them at the same time. "Hey, shrimps." One of the men, the bulkier of the two called, "This is private property. You should not be here." Scram. The boys glanced at each other. "N plus Sama, did this man just order us around, as if he were our father?" Naruto asked. Sasuke snorted, his eyes narrowing on the man. "You presume much if you think you can go ordering goose around." The brothers pulled out their weapons, Sasuke his sword and Naruto a pair of kunai, and they jumped at the men. Once the guards were dead, the boys headed inside, their weapons still at the ready. They met one man, just by the door, but before he could draw up or call for help, Naruto silenced him with a wind-charged kunai to the throat. From then on, it was a bloodbath soon joined by Yamato, who had, in the meanwhile killed Geto and collected several documents of interest, as well as a nice sum of God, which they would give to Zabuza. The next day, Yamato would question the boys' sanity, for he had seen the way they'd fought, and he'd seen how unfazed both were when life left the men's eyes. When Zabuza returned predictably with his accomplice, the fake hunter Nin Team 13 were already waiting. When the thick mist descended, Naruto's first move was to blow it all away so they could face Th2 missing Nin without hindrance. Zabuza, of course, was not at all happy that someone ruined his playground. "You brat." He growled, pointing his massive sword at Naruto, "You keep messing up my jutsu." Naruto shrugged, looking entirely unapologetic. "Sorry." Zabuza growled, stalking closer, but before he made it even halfway, Kakashi and Yamato both leapt between the Kiri shinobi and their students. "Your contract is off, Mamachi," Kakashi said calmly. Zabuza growled lowly, surprise flickering trough his face. "What are you crowing about, Haddock?" "We killed Geto." Yamato clarified, "His hold on Nami is no more, therefore your contract is void." Understanding dawned on the swordman's face, but before he could say anything or physically lash out and lament the lack of income, Yamato tossed a small bag to him, which Zabuza caught instinctively. "Wah. That's the money Geto promised you, Alto, mind me, he had no intention of paying you." "I've seen his files," Yamato said. "The people of Nami have gotten their money back, which Geto has stolen, and they agreed to pay you the sum Geto promised if you leave them in peace. Don't kill Tazuna or anyone, really, and you even get your money." For a tense moment, Zabuza eyed them, and all four of the Konoha shinobi were ready to leap into action if it was needed. However, after the moment passed, the demon of the hidden mist lowered his blade. "I shall leave the man be, then." They all breathed a sigh of relief. Soon, they could go home. Kakashi was happy but most of all relived when they finally made it back to the village. On the entire way from Nami, Naruto used every available moment to dabble with notes of genjutsu. The kid was in uzumaki and several of his direct senju ancestors were renowned masters of the art too, but seals were tricky and dangerous. And while Naruto had his parents' notes, Kakashi would have been much calmer if there was a proficient teacher guiding the blonde. He knew this, and that you could not know seals when your sensei and almost aunt were masters of it, but it was far from enough to guide his student. In fact, Kakashi could safely say that Naruto has already surpassed him in that field. Yamato knew even less than Kakashi did if it came to the intricate field. Where was Jiraiya-sama when he was needed? The man had taught Minato-sensei and on top of it was Naruto's godfather. He should be here for the blonde. Of course, Kakashi understood that as Aspie Master, he was busy, but didn't he have some time for his godson? Like dropping in after 12 years. On the other hand, Kakashi wasn't sure he wanted to be there when Naruto and thus Sasuke met the Sannin. They would most likely try to gut him and say that the man had abandoned Naruto hours after he was born. A part of Kakashi, the evil part, agreed. Jiraiya, after he'd seen how much Naruto had looked like both of his parents. The point was that Naruto was very good with seals, and on the third day back from Nami, Kakashi had lost a blonde halfway trough an explanation. Yamato was already brain dead by then, trying to catch up. Sasuke had wisely tuned Naruto out, saying he trusted the blonde without question if it came to seals. And now no, Kakashi was worried. They'd sent the boys to rest and had given the report to the Hokage about the messy, upgraded but still successful mission. That had happened yesterday, and now Kakashi stood on their usual training ground with no students in sight. Where were the students he was supposed to teach? Well, maybe at this point, Naruto should teach him if it came to seals, but shush, no one in the village needed to know that. He wanted some of his pride intact, after all. Yamato had been called away for other sort of work. With the Chunin exams just over the horizon, they needed to be extra cautious with security. So for a while, he would handle the boys on his own. If only he had boys to handle. He huffed, trying to recall where he would find the boys. Where could they? Oh, yes. The Hokage monument. Naruto liked sitting on his father's stone head and watch the village go by with their lives. He quickly turned and headed towards the monument. They would either be sitting on Minato-sensei's head or they would be on the plateau behind the heads. It was the spot where they usually escaped to be alone. It was the spot where not even Anbu had followed them after a while. They just kept an eye out around the area, but no one ever approached them. Whenever they were up there, it was private time and even Shinobi respected privacy. After about 12 minutes, he finally reached the place and in another 5 minutes, he even made it to the top. He froze in the shadows of the stairs as he saw how relaxed both of his students were, Naruto leaning on Sasuke's shoulder. In that moment, they indeed looked like brothers, regardless of the stark contrast in appearance. It was almost like his eyes were playing tricks on him, as two other people's shadows seemed to overlap with his students' forms. Brown-haired people he'd never seen, wearing old formal white kimonos. N+Sama, do you think it would work? Naruto asked, his voice alazi, almost sleepy slur. Even after all this time, it threw him off how formal the two were with each other, despite the obvious friendship and brotherly affection. That will work, Otanto? Sasuke asked. His own voice was just a bit sharper, more awake. Still, they were obviously content and unfocused, otherwise he would have been long detected. Not that Kakashi minded it. Even after years of watching the boys grow up, they were still an unsolved mystery. This was his chance to find out something more, perhaps. Uchiha. Naruto answered. We signed our contract so long ago. Do you think we could summon them? Kakashi blinked owlishly. The boy should summons of their own. Since when? Besides, it couldn't be too long ago, since they were barely 13, Naruto wasn't even 13. So, obviously the Uzumaki was exaggerating. Sasuke hummed. From my knowledge, it should still work. I remember Otom-sama saying to choose partners wisely because they will stay with us all our lives. And considering everything, I think those contracts should still hold. Because we are still, even if we aren't. Kakashi's head spun. Since when would Sasuke be so formal with dead parents to still call Fugaku Otom-sama? Gods, he'd known the Uchiha were a bunch to keep traditions, just like the Hyuga, but this was Shinjid. Let's try. Naruto murmured and then stood up. Kakashi's back was ramrod straight as the boys stood side by side. They wouldn't try Uchiha's right. Not without a contract right. Except, they did just that, faster than Kakashi could truly comprehend. Drawing blood from their hands, running trough the hand signs at speed. Kakashi never thought he would see Genin perform them Hitsuji, Inu, Tori, Seru, Hitsuji, and then their palms were on the ground, the jutsu shiki spreading from beneath their hands. And to his shock, both glowed with the overload of chakra. Naruto's was gold-green, while Sasuke's was blue-purple. Uchiha's no jutsu summoning technique, they announced at the same time and the next minute there were two identical plumes of smoke. When the smoke cleared, Kakashi's jaw dropped. In front of Sasuke stood a massive, horse-sized wolf. It had pitch-black fur and orange eyes, like two simmering ambers. Its massive fangs glinted sharply, and Kakashi had no doubt this beast was more dangerous than any of his dogs ever could be. Naruto was facing a magnificent white stag, the same size as the wolf, and it had the most beautiful antlers Kakashi has ever seen. Almost like the interlocked branches of an ancient tree, pure ivory in color, but as the light fell on them, they seemed almost gold. Its hooves were the same. How the hell did the boys have such summons? He had read this and that about some of the summons in their realms. The wolf contract had been lost ages ago, and he hadn't even known there was a deer contract. He heard rumors, but like every other sane human, he thought it some legend from the time of the Rikiden Sennin. And then, to his shock, both great summons lowered their heads after a moment of contemplation, as if they had trouble recognizing their summoners. Ridiculous wasted. Summons don't forget the face of their summoners. No one had more than one face in their life, after all. Indra-sama. The wolf greeted. Asura-sama. The deer intoned in a softer tone, careful that it's his antlers wouldn't harm his blonde student. Not deer, of dot. Wait, why the hell would those summons call his students by different names? What in the name of kami was going on? Naruto smiled and reached out, stroking the stag's fur. Shiritsuno. Old friend. A pleasure to see you again, Kagetsu. Sasuke said as he took a step closer. The two summons leaned into the touches of his students, momentary not acknowledging one another. But then, the wolf started growling as its fiery eyes landed on the stag. You, the wolf snarled. The stag glared back, his hooves clattering on the stone. Kakashi never thought to see such ice-cold, deadly conviction in the eyes of a herbivorous animal, summon or not. Yes, me. Enough. His students said at once, their voices cracking like whips. Kakashi couldn't help but shake at the amount of power and authority that single word carried. Both of the great beasts looked at their summoners in shock. We are not enemies. Sasuke said, his tone level. We started something and now we finished it. We shall never fight again. Naruto spoke, his tone ringing with finality, we stand side by side, as brothers should. As we should always have. Sasuke said. So, I believe, it is time to cease the hostilities between the wolves of Theobikem Haunted Forest and the deer of Theoshizora Tani Starry Valley. We work together now. I know well that your clans have always been at odds as it is the order of nature. But no more open violence. Just keep clear of each other. For a while, the two summons seemed to concur it. Then, both nodded. It shall be as you wish. Both said at once. The boys smiled well, Naruto grinned more like and leaned into their summon's fur again. And then, suddenly, the wolf twitched. Sama. Someone's here. Both of his students perked up at those words, and Kakashi cursed colorfully in the privacy of his mind. He did a quick body flicker, hoping and praying that Naruto hadn't caught his chakra signature. Kakashi's first stop was the Hokage office. They had a meeting about the upcoming Chunin exam anyway. Afterwards, he could ask the Hokage about those summons. The thought of Sasuke having wolves as partners still nagged at him. That contract had once belonged to the Uchiha clan, if the old scrolls were to be believed, but it had been lost even before the time of Madara and the Shaddai. Once he arrived in the office, he settled in a corner, surprising many that he was on time. He was rarely late to things, since he'd taken the boys under his wing, but it was something many of his colleagues were unused to. The Hokage seemed vaguely pleased at his appearance, too. He was sure that they would have approbate word anyway, considering the unique setup his team had. After all, himself and Yamato could not join the boys, they would just be spectators trough the exam. The boys could only count on each other, but Kakashi wasn't too worried. As close as they were, he was sure they would not be separated so easily. As you are all aware, the Hokage started after a few minutes, when he was sure all those who were meant to be here were present. This year's Chunin exams will start soon, and we will be hosting them. First and foremost, I would like to say that this means the strengthening of our security to ensure the safety of our guests, as well as the order of the village. Mutters of agreement and acknowledgement passed through the room. The Chunin exams were always the busiest time of the year. Also, I would like to know which teams will be nominated. The Kage asked, his aged but still sharp eyes sweeping the room. The few senseis, who had their teams since last year's like guy nominated their teams, believing them ready. Much to everyone's surprise and the disapproval of a few Kurenai nominated her team, too. Her kids had graduated this year with Sasuke and Naruto, but that wasn't the only reason her announcement caused a stir. Kurenai was one of the newest most inexperienced Chunin of the village. Kakashi could tell that many were questioning her sanity at that bold move. However, the Hokage waved it off, saying he trusted the team leader's judgment of their students, regardless of nominating a team or not. Asuma also nominated the new Inoshika CHM trio. When the Hokage's eyes fell on him, Kakashi knew what were the words that the Hokage was expecting, regardless of the boys being ready or not. It was a good thing that they were skilled and learned fast. They were arity. I had a Kakashi nominate Team 13 consisting of Genin's Uchiha Sasuke and Senju Uzumaki Naruto for the Chunin exams. He stated calmly. Very well, Kakashi. The Hokage nodded, accepting his words. Unsurprisingly, several of his peers looked at him as if he'd lost his mind. Alto Asuma was looking at his father as if the man had lost his mind in his old age. Luckily, the Sarutobi knew better than to voice any protests. Soon after the forms were passed, the meeting was dismissed. Alto Kakashi remained, lingering just by the edge. Once even the last of the gathered left, the Hokage looked at him, taking a drag of his pipe. How are they faring? Kakashi didn't even mask the pride in his voice. Very good, Hokage-sama. However, both of them are naturally talented once Naruto gets over certain problems, and it is safe to say that they just need the guiding hand, not actual teaching. Neither from me, nor from Yamato. They teach themselves and each other, most of the time. But there's been times when they did turn to us for help, even Sasuke. It seems the arrogance the academy mentioned is not as bad as they had made it out to be. And while he had mentioned going after Itachi that first day, he doesn't even acknowledge that the man is out there somewhere. Keep saying we are his family Naruto, Yamato and myself, that is. Both of them consider the team their family, in fact. He paused, letting all of the information sink in. It's humbling, in a way, because they consider us a part of their extended family, as Sasuke had said, as we are in possession of their clan's Kekkei Genkai, regardless of the fact that neither myself nor Yamato were born with them. Kakashi added at last. The Hokage seemed thoughtful for a moment and nodded. It's indeed nice thing to hear. It bodes well for both of them. Both of them had been alone and it's calming that they are willing to forge bonds other than what they share. No matter how few those bonds are. Kakashi hummed. Yes. It seemed that the advice and care we showed them with Yamato grounded them. It showed them that they aren't alone or just the two of them. Kakashi chuckled. It's cute how protective they can be sometimes. Even if they know that Yamato and I can handle ourselves. The Hokage chuckled in amusement. Well, then, be sure to take care of your new family, Kakashi-kun. Kakashi's eye crinkled into a smile. I will, Hokage-sama. As he moved towards the window, he recalled the main reason he'd wanted to speak with the man. Hokage-sama. The man turned in his seat to look at him again. Yes, Kakashi. What do you know of summons? Wolves and deer, to be precise. The boys hadn't come to our spot and just before the meeting, I found them on the monument, the plateau, to be precise. They did a summoning. I didn't even know they had signed contracts, and by the way they spoke of it and by the way the summons themselves greeted the boys they have it for a while. The Hokage studied him for a very long moment, his eyes wide. Wolves and deer, you say? Kakashi nodded. The wolf clan Ofabik Mori and the deer clan of Hashizora Tani. That's what they said. I've only heard of them in legends. The aged man admitted. I thought them to be but legend. Kakashi nodded. Do you by chance remember something of that legend? The Hokage's face fell thoughtful. Not much. Only that those clans are among the most ancient ones. If I remember correctly, those clans were the first one to make a contract with humans. Precisely, they made contracts with the two sons of the Rikidem Sennin. The sons, who were the forefathers of the Uchiha and Senju clans. Kakashi's mind was working overtime, trying to connect the dots. Have their names been recorded? The sons. The Hokage nodded slowly, almost unsure. Jiraiya mentioned something. Something that the toad spoke of in passing. There are rumors that the great toad sage had met the Sennin in his youth. I think yes. The sons were named Asura and Indra. Kakashi's mind came to a screeching halt. Indra and Asura. Those were the names the two summons had used when they addressed his students. Why are you asking, Kakashi? Kakashi tried feigning nonchalance. He shrugged. Just curious. My students do after all seem to have those ancient contracts. How they came across it is a mystery I have yet to solve. The Hokage seemed satisfied with the answer. Well, maybe you could try asking them. Those are ancient contracts and had not been in circulation for a long time, long enough to fall into legend. Kakashi nodded. I will be sure to mention it to them once I meet them for training. He murmured. Then he nodded to the sandaime and leapt out the window. As he sped off the rooftops, his mind was still trying to give meaning to all he had heard. Why would the members of two legendary summon clans call my cute little students by the name of their forefathers, who are literal legends? It was a mystery he intended to solve, no matter how long it took or how unnice it was of him, as a trusted sensei, to snoop around his students and pseudo-little brothers. When Kakashi found his students hours later, they were sitting at Ichiraku Ramen, eating. Well, Sasuke was eating and Naruto was inhaling ramen. It was such a Kushina thing to do that Kakashi's heart ached. Did the blonde realize just how much he was like his parents? He was painfully similar to them, yet at the same time, he was much more. Something else too which Kakashi couldn't name. Calm and composed, when need be, calculating and polite in a way not even Minato-sensei had been. But, if the nickname was Naruto's great-grandfather, then perhaps those were things the blonde had inherited from him. He'd heard that the man had been calculating, pragmatic and polite sometimes so much that they called him distant and cold. But Naruto also had a warm, bubbly and charming personality that if the sandaime was right, was as much Minato-sensei as much it was Shadaime-sama. And on the top of it all, Naruto was a genius when it came to seals. Much like Sensei Tobirama-sama or Midō had been. The sandaime would not have mentioned them if it were not true. Kakashi chuckled at the thoughts. It seemed as if Naruto had collected the best, most useful traits from all his family, regardless of them being Senju or Uzumaki. Sasuke was much harder to compare, Kakashi mused. He was not as energetic as Obito or Shisui had been. Rather, he was calm and rational, like Itachi had been, but in an aesthetic way. And he was just as caring and loving as Shisui and Mikoto-san had been, even if he showed it rarely or in odd ways. Sometimes stoic and overly wary, borderline cold, as Kakashi remembered Uchiha Fugaku to be, yet it didn't seem like that, either. The boys were like their families in a lot of ways, but there were things Kakashi could not place for dear life. Like the wisdom they seemed to possess, well beyond their years. Wisdom and sadness and darkness that didn't belong in children, yet it was not a sort of darkness that came from their rocky start. No. It wasn't even darkness Yustashido. As if they knew more than teens their age should. As if they carried a weight they were afraid to share with anyone else other than each other, or as if they couldn't share that weight with anyone but each other. Indra. Asura. The names slithered into his mind unchecked and Kakashi found his single eye narrowing on his students. What did it mean? What were they hiding? Because, looking back, it was obvious. Ever since that day, when he found Naruto resting on Sasuke's shoulder, the Uchiha drinking tea, they were hiding something. They trained like no other. They saw the world in a different light than others there, they saw the world in a different light than some adults. He had asked Naruto once what he thought about the fox sealed inside him and Naruto had answered that he was sad for it. Sad, because the fox was angry and bitter and knew not how to care for others anymore. There had been a time when the likes of the fox were caring. But perhaps it had been his conversation with Sasuke before the wave mission that had been most eye-opening. Eye-opening to how much the village has misjudged not only his sensei's son, but also Sasuke. Kakashi was most surprised to find Sasuke alone. There was no Naruto in sight when he arrived on the training ground. Instead, Sasuke only had a cute puppy with him. The dog barked sharply at his arrival, and Sasuke gently patted the animal, with a cross look on his regal features. Ah, damn the uchiha and their near-perfect looks. Good morning, Kakashi-sensei. Sasuke greeted as he poked the puppy again, as the animal growled. Shiro, enough. He's a friend. The puppy made an unhappy sound before obediently settling next to the uchiha. When Sasuke was saddest, their eyes met. Gomen. He's a bit unsure of new people. Ma, think nothing of it. I have dogs too. They're nin dogs, true, but some things are the same, regardless of them being summons or normal dogs. He studied the puppy for a second. Sasuke was calmly stroking its fur, sitting straight and regal, even now, when he was supposedly relaxed. True. I didn't know you had a dog. Kakashi remarked. I found him after moving in with Naruto. Just a few days after graduation. Naruto adores him too, so we decided to keep him. He's small yet, so he doesn't eat all that much. He said calmly. His face was calm and unmoving, like a lake, but Kakashi could see he loved the animal. He cared for it in the same odd sort of way he cared for Naruto. Someone under Itachi who'd examined Sasuke had said that he might be a problem without proper guidance. But problematic people, problematic shinobi candidate or active, did not care for animals so openly. In that moment, Sasuke didn't seem to be problematic at all. Kakashi sat down on the ground too, not too far from his student. The puppy Shiro poked his nose towards him in a curious cute way. His black eyes watched Kakashi curiously, but he didn't move from under Sasuke's hand, stroking the brown fur. You know, Sasuke, I'm supposed to have this conversation with both you and Naruto. About your future. It's a bit more complicated for you too, as you have no families to fall back on. He started cautiously. Sasuke looked at him, his eyes calculating, narrowed just a bit. I have Naruto and he has me. It's how it had been for a long while. We're fine, Alto, Isupis, Ishil, thank you for your concern. Kakashi eyed him. There was it again. That overly formal tone that did not belong into this period. Perhaps into the warring clans era, but not here, into this more modern society. The had come. Have you thought of what to do with your life if you make it to Jonin? Perhaps join Anbu once Naruto makes Hokage. Sasuke seemed thoughtful, then gave a tiny snort. No. Naruto would drag me to the Hokage monument and drop me from the top after binding my chakra if he ever considered Anbu. He wants me as his right hand, yes, so he said, but in a more open way. I see, and what do you think of it? Sasuke huffed, obviously annoyed with the probing, but he was far too polite and composed to tell him to fuck off. I think it's okay. He's my best friend. My brother. I went to help him build something new. Better. We promised and I went to keep that promise. The I want to keep it this time was muttered so softly that Kakashi almost didn't hear it. He filed that away for later. That's not push his luck. Sasuke was, after all, willing to open up to him somewhat. I see. And what of your brother? He asked. Now that Sasuke was more content, he dared risking the question. Sasuke arched an eyebrow. Hell, even the way he arched an eyebrow and looked at him in a wet now. Look, was noble. This kid could go and parade among the long-robed perfumed nobles of the Fire Daimyo's court and fit right in if only he changed clothes. Shouldn't you ask Naruto that? Kakashi blinked. He opened his mouth and closed it like a fish. He'd never been so grateful for his mask before. I wasn't talking about Naruto. He said slowly after gathering his wits again. I meant Itachi. Sasuke's eyes bled into the sharingan faster than Kakashi blinked. The cold fire in the depth of the genin's eyes were almost frightening. That man is not me, brother, and if you ever call Thakin's lair such where I can hear, I will crave your sharingan out. Respecting the wish of a dead or not. He growled, lacing his words with killing intent. Kakashi's blood ran cold. Not because of the killing intent, no, it was just a drop, but because that was an all too real truth. Sasuke gathered Shiro into his grip and rose. That man does not exist. I have no business with traitors and kinslayers. Let the Konoha hunters catch him. What he will get from the hunter nin, and once he is dragged back, tossed in front of the council, shall be enough. I will ask him why he had done it, tell him that he failed the Uchiha's policies about family and kin, and then he can rot in a cell for the rest of his days, for all I care. He turned and started walking away. Kakashi needed a moment to understand what had been said. Before he could comment, Sasuke spoke again, without turning. Kakashi could only trace the unfamiliar moon circle symbol on his vest's back. Countless shinobi of my kin, those who had the sharingan, fell for it. Fell for what the nickname called so catchily the Nikishimi no Noroi. He is one of them, one of the fallen. I shall not fall for that curse. Naruto has shown me that I can live without falling for it, and Naruto is more my brother than he will ever be. And then, he leapt into the trees, leaving Kakashi alone on the training ground. Sasuke was not bent on revenge, like some of the evaluations said. No. He was just a natural loner. In fact, he could care less about what happened to Itachi, apparently. First, he had said he would go after the older, but no. He meant it that he would ask his questions and then leave Itachi. Leave the man to carry the weight of his actions. And hell, he'd heard about the Uchiha's Nikishimi no Noroi. It was the ideal completely opposite to Konoha's will of fire, although Minato-sensei had said the Uchiha had overcome it since Konoha's founding, perhaps they hadn't. Perhaps Itachi had fallen for it, like Sasuke had said. And it was Sasuke himself who was free of it, and so, he was willing to look into the future, not pursuing Itachi, as long as he had Naruto by his side. Sasuke was definitely being more mature about this whole thing than he had the right to be. Come on, Kakashi had been in a similar situation and he had not been half as mature about it as Sasuke was. If not for Minato-sensei and Kushina-san, he would still be living in the Hada compound. Almost as if he'd lived a life before, along with Naruto. As if they knew all the pain and suffering and joy of life. And trough it all, they'd learned that it was best to stick together, no matter what he mused. Kakashi scowled at his thoughts. What was he even thinking? What was he thinking that the boys were some extremely old people in young bodies who'd lived once? All the better they were who? Those Asura and Enter the Summons had called them. No. Totally, utterly ridiculous, and impossible. Even if something like being reborn in a different body was possible, how much power would that need? That would take awfully lot, and that would mean the boys had enough power, somewhere in them to match a Bijk. To carve a valley, to reshape the land, only because they were having fun. The boys were talented, prodigies in their own way, yes. But no man, not even the Sharingan or Madara had such power. That would make them something like half human half god or something. And what? Their father was, who? The Rikiden Sennin. No. They were misplaced in time then just by a millennia or so. Besides, Naruto looked all too much like his parents to be anyone else's son. Kakashi shook his head and grunted a bit. He was just overthinking things. He should just be happy that his brat students were smart enough not to die early in their shinobi career. Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi was broken out of his musings by Naruto calling out to him. The scarecrow looked at his blonde student and waved nonchalantly. Hello Naruto, Sasuke. May I join? Sasuke nodded and gestured at the empty seat next to him. Kakashi smiled and ordered a beef ramen after some consideration. What brings you here? Sasuke asked as he ordered another bowl of ramen. Kakashi eyed his students discreetly, trying to find anything that would point out that they were imposters, that they weren't the sons of their families. He found nothing out of place. They looked just as they always had. I thought it was time to tell you about the upcoming Chunin exams and that the Hokage has very high expectations of you too. The boys shared a brief surprised look and then their features were smooth and calm again. Usually it was off-putting even for some adults to hear such words, and they were sockum. Naruto raised an eyebrow and gods be good, he managed it in the salmon sort of way Sasuke had. It was almost annoying. And what would those expectations entail exactly? Kakashi almost groaned. Were those two even children? Because, right now, it totally didn't feel like it. It was as if they were brushing off those standards the Hokage had. As if they'd lived by much higher standards, which was kind of hard to believe, with their families dead. Is hurting very variably courtesy of two impossible students of his. These two are even more of a headache now than as children. I need a raise. The first true sign of the nearing exam Kakashi has mentioned was the commotion, Sasuke noted. Konoha wasn't just the first shinobi village, it was also one of the biggest, even among the Great Five. So naturally, it was a populous place, full of life. However, this sort of commotion that came with the nearing Chunin exams was different. Konoha had a feel to it. Almost like a person. Warm, welcoming if with a little sting. The shadows of distrust and fear lurked in every heart. He'd learned that fast, being near Naruto. People tried being kinder to the blonde, if only to get some favors out of the Senju Uzumaki heir. The point was that he was used to Konoha's familiarity. But now, the familiarity was disrupted by countless foreign faces, all of them shinobi. The familiarity was blown out the window the moment his sensory brushed with a foreigner's chakra. And whenever he felt something foreign, he would steal a glance that way and have a look at the headbands. The Kigakure, Sunagakure, Kumagakure and so on. Foreign village symbols. Foreign faces. And the more of those foreigners would arrive, the closer the exams would be. We're close now. His brother murmured. Sasuke had no doubt that Naruto felt this difference even more than he did. His senses and sensory were sharper than Sasuke's after all. Indeed. He agreed as they walked off the market district. The civilians bowed and greeted them exaggeratedly. Uchiha-sama and Senju-sama echoed around them. Some of the older generation said that how he and Naruto were side by side was probably how the Shoudai and Madara had been. It grated at him that people compared him to Madara, a traitor and madman who sought the destruction of the world. Naruto froze suddenly, perking up, watching and listening, like an animal. Then, his violet eyes narrowed. "Shukaku." He whispered just loud enough for Sasuke to hear. Sasuke raised an eyebrow. "I'm sorry." Naruto stole him a glance. "Shukaku. He's here. His Jinchuriki is here." He clarified, his voice still low. Sasuke hummed. "Lead the way then. I went to see who's the person our brother got stuck with." Naruto nodded and leapt onto Astardir's stall's top before leaping further up onto the roofs. Sasuke followed the whiskered blonde without question. He allowed Naruto to have a few steps on him so he could properly locate their Tanuki brother. This way, if Naruto took a sudden turn or stopped without warning, Sasuke wouldn't run into him. "There." Naruto said, pointing at two Suna shinobi. One was a girl with sandy blonde hair and emacivitation in her back. The other was a boy with painted face and black cat-like suit. Now that they were close, Sasuke's senses prickled with a wild chakra. It was indeed Shukaku's, but it felt wilder than ever. And it wasn't coming from those two, but they had traces of it around them. So, Shukaku's host was their third teammate. His eyes narrowed when he saw the clown in the cat suit pick up a young kid by the scarf. Sasuke didn't need his brother's special emotion, sensing to know that the boy was terrified. Sasuke spotted two other kids about the boy's age, watching from the cover of a tree, with terrified faces. "That's the Sandame's grandson." Naruto growled. "Konohamaru." And the kid was in trouble. They shared a look and leapt down, facing the two foreigner shinobi. They flared their chakra just a bit. It was Naruto who stepped forwards. "If I were you, catboy, I will let the child go. The one you're holding is Sarutobi Konohamaru, the Sandame Hokage's grandson." Naruto warned. Imagine what the Hokage would think, finding foreign shinobi guests bullying his beloved grandson. Sasuke continued, stepping next to his brother. The Sunanin dropped Konohamaru, as if he had been burned. The child scrambled to stand and hid behind Naruto's leg. Sasuke didn't take offense. Asura's chakra, even when flared as a treat, had been warmer. The kid probably didn't know but he was gravitating towards what his mind deemed safer. Besides, Naruto knew the kid's name, so he must have met him sometime. Naruto glanced down at Konohamaru and then behind them, where the other two kids were. He patted the kid on the head. "Go home. Take your friends too." "That's sure thing, Naruto." "Thanks." Konohamaru murmured, running. Sasuke didn't need to take his eyes off of the foreigners to know the kids left as fast as possible. "The little punk," the cat-suited one growled, glaring after the children. Whatever he'd done, Sasuke cut him off coldly. He is a child and a citizen of Konoha. You are guests here, and any sort of violence dealt by foreigner shinobi to native civilians is an act of war. Asuna shinobi's face darkened. "Who?" "Shut your mouth, Kankuro, before you cause more trouble and embarrassment to the village." A new voice growled from a nearby tree. Sasuke turned there, seeing a reed hanging upside down. Then, he was gone in a swirl of sand and appeared not far from the other two. He had pale green eyes, short red hair almost uzumaki red, and thick rings of black around his eyes. He also had a kanji for love on his forehead. He was the one, exuding Shukaku's chakra in such sinister waves. Too much chakra leaking, and those dark rings with Shukaku not sealed properly. "Gaara," the girl murmured, fear flashing in her eyes. Gaara turned towards them, his eyes flashing with malice. "And maybe just a touch madness. You too are strong." He growled, pointing at them, "Mother wants your blood." The words were as if his brother Usatsuki hit him. That kid thought that Shukaku was a girl, and his mother on top of it. Oh, sweet Saint Rickon what had become of the world and their big siblings after they had died. Naruto groaned out loud. "Mother." He snorted. "He's a bitch for the Shinju's sake, and you got the gender wrong, kid. They don't really have one per se, but if they did, Shukaku would be male." The other two Suna shinobi looked at Naruto as if he'd lost his mind. Sasuke flared his chakra a bit more. "Don't you recognize us, Shukaku? Has imprisonment dulled your memory enough to forget your Ankin, Tanuki?" There was a spike of chakra and the reed bent down, obviously fighting the influence of the malicious chakra. They could not speak with Shukaku, but this was all the reaction Sasuke needed. Shukaku recognized them. Plus, this was all the proof they needed to know that the seal was a sham. A bit more pressure and it would break. Not the work of an Uzumaki, for sure. Gaara finally stood up and looked at them with wide eyes, half crazed, half fearful. "Waryu. Mother wants your blood." He pointed at Sasuke. but also fears both of you. Oh, he has arisen to fear us. Naruto growled. Gaara's gaze shifted to Naruto. The name Senju Uzumaki Naruto. Uchiha Sasuke. The moment they spoke their names, the Jinchuriki's teammates paled even more. We meet in the exam, Shukaku. Naruto said, his eyes lingering on the redeed. Try not to cause trouble Udal then. They turned, purposefully exposing their backs to the Suna shinobi. Shukaku could see his Jinchuriki's eyes. He would surely recognize the Otatsuki symbol on their backs. True to their thoughts, they weren't even on the nearest roof when Gaara's or more like Shukaku's killing intent hit them. They braced themselves and ignoring the bloodlust radiating from the Tanuki, headed for the Hokage office in an unspoken agreement. Best warn the Hokage. Naruto leapt into the Hokage office only to find that the window was closed and he was flying towards it with no stopping. Oh, shit. He formed 2 chakra chains and sent them ahead. The chains went straight loudly shattering the innocent window, anchoring into the office's sturdy wooden pavement. Oh, he'd have to repair that with Mokuton later. Using the chains, he pulled himself in, shifting his stance to kick in the remains of the window so the glass would not harm him. He landed in front of the cage desk in a crouch, chains still attached, while Sasuke stopped in the window, his shoes breaking even more of the small glass parts that still stuck to the casement. 10 points on collateral damage, Obito. He said, a smirk appearing on his face. Naruto scowled. That freaking window Isolwasapin. How intricate should I have known he will have it shut now. Naruto, Sasuke. Kakashi called, giving them a warning look. What are you two doing here? Sasuke shrugged, glancing at their sensei before looking at the Hokage. Business. The Hokage studied them for a brief second. And what is that? Naruto stood, retracking his chakra chains with a soft rattle. We met Jinchuriki, 2 of them, to be precise. We came cause of Suna's, but on the way here, we also saw Taki's. Then silence appeared the moment he spoke the dreaded word. The Hokage's eyes glinted sharply. The identity of Jinchuriki is a village secret, Naruto. Naruto gave the Hokage a deadpan look. We feel each other's presence. Well, more like I felt them. They didn't know who I was, cause I made sure to let my chakra mask any and all traces of the furball's own. Taki brought Shuchi's host. The Hokage nodded. I will remember that. And what of Suna? Suna brought Shukaku's host, the redeed. Gaara. The problem is that he is unstable. He was radiating so much of the Bij chakra that even the fox roared bloody murder. Oh, so did the Tanuki. Sasuke said, drawing all the eyes to himself. He had an amused look on his face as their eyes met. Naruto rolled his eyes. Roared bloody murder on Senju, I guess. Naruto shrugged. Not my fault that the chakra is all the same, and plus I will think Shukaku does not have fond memories of the last person who possessed Mokuton. The Hokage looked at them before nodding. Instable, you say? Naruto shrugged. I don't know enough Genjutsu to judge that was a lie, but the others didn't need to know that, but all that chakra leaking was not nice. And the crazed look in the guy's eyes when he saw us with Sasuke shook his head. And when the guy revealed himself, he brought all that killing intent and madness I can't even name the proper emotion. It almost shut down my senses. Keep an eye on him. The Hokage's expression darkened before it was back to normal. Thank you for the warning, Naruto. We will keep extra eyes on that group. We will also try to locate the Shichibu's host. Perhaps you could aid the Anbu later. Naruto shrugged. Sure. He darted toward Sasuke. Sorry for the broken window. I'll patch up the pavement later. And then he leapt out, followed by Sasuke. What sort of little monsters you two have for students, Kakashi, Yamato? Asked Asuma, looking at his colleagues. Kakashi and Yamato shared a look. Cute protective students who can be destructive trouble magnets when they want to be. They answered in sync. The next day Naruto and Sasuke found themselves pacing in the Namika's house. Shiro was laying on his pillow below the window and watched them. A few days before they'd moved into the apartment that had been Namika's Minato's before he married. After the marriage, the couple had lived in the Uzumaki compound which had been destroyed when Kurama had been unleashed. Luckily, the Namika's house, on the border of the merchant and clan districts, was completely intact and the Hokage had given Naruto the keys after some probing. It was much more comfortable place to live for the two of them than the tiny old apartment on the border of the red light district. They had added small personal touches to their rooms. Naruto had taken his father's old room and Sasuke claimed what Kakashi had said, been the guest room. Tomorrow's the first day. Naruto murmured. The written exam. He groaned. Why does there have to be something written? Sasuke stopped and huffed. That's our smallest problem right now, Obito. Naruto glared at him heatedly and his eyes seemed to flicker red for a second, although Sasuke knew that it may very well have been a trick of the light. Naruto's dense chakra was like another layer to Thihaki skin, impossible for Kurama to penetrate. Not at half power. After all, half of the fox was sealed within the yondaime and now, the shinigami. We'll keep an eye on Shukaku and Shimei. The blonde murmured. I'm more worried about the exam. Sasuke couldn't help the chuckle that escaped him. We were once capable of craving valleys and make the bitch cower, just with a few words and Yaru read about orating a few words on a piece of paper. He asked incredulously. Naruto's expression darkened. I can't help it. But at writing things. Well, things that are not seals. Sasuke shook his head. You know enough to scrape past. But, do you want to go over some of the things we might need? He asked in a softer tone. It was obvious that the blonde was on the verge of a panic attack. Naruto paused and looked at him for a long moment. Then, his expression turned sheepish. Please. The next morning, the brothers appeared in front of the academy, armed to the teeth. Of course, most of their weaponry were hidden beneath their clothes and in easily accessible storage seals on their bodies that were covered by their clothes. Morning, boys. Naruto grinned at the sight of their senseis. Kakashi-sensei. Yamato-sensei. Good morning. Sasuke greeted, pleased to see the two Jonin. It helped ease the nerves, especially Naruto's nerves. Bekiseno, the former prodigy of Ninja Quasnotenage. He refused to admit that he was in fact jumpy, even to his brother. We thought to drop by and wish you luck. Yamato said. But, you won't really need it. Just give all you have, like you do during training time, and you'll get Trough without too much trouble. Naruto smiled softly. Thanks. Now, chop. Go before you're late. Kakashi said, making a gesture towards the doors. Go to room 301. That's where the written exam will take place. Sasuke hummed and nudged his brother teammate. Thank you. Come on, Obito. The sooner we get Trough this, the sooner we can focus on other things. Naruto nodded and they walked inside, so close that their shoulders were touching. But, knowing that the other was there helped both of them keep their minds clear and focused. In this life, they were more codependent than before. Heck, before, Indra had been such a loner that Asura barely saw him, despite Asura being Indra's greatest treasure in life, his most precious person, even after things had gone downhill. Not that Asura felt like a precious person then, constantly fighting and dodging blows meant to kill. It wasn't hard to be when they had no families of their own and the weight of the past was something no one knew. No one but them and the Bijk, but only Kurama was here and Kurama was still mostly quiet and brooding. They were just on the second floor when they saw a group of genin gathered in front of a door, guarded by two Chunin. This is room 301, no. Let us in then. One of the girls shouted. Naruto and Sasuke shared a look. Wiping away the genjutsu with their minds was like flicking off an annoying bug. 201. They shared another look and decided to slip past as quietly as possible. If this bunch couldn't even detect such a low-level genjutsu, then perhaps it would be best for them not to participate in the exam. They quietly climbed the stairs to the third floor. They barely left the stairs behind when they ran into three genin bearing Konoha headbands. One was a brown-haired girl, the other was a boy wearing green spandex. The last was a Hekta. They hadn't encountered anyone from their uncle Himura's descendants since Hinata. Hello. Are you new genin? Asked the girl with buns. Hadn't seen you around much. Yes, we are new. Sasuke answered simply. The girl studied them for a second. Oh, I'm Higurashi Tenten by the way. They're my teammates, Rock Lee and Hike Niji. Senju Uzumaki Naruto. The blonde nodded and Uchiha Sasuke. Tenten's brown eyes narrowed. You're team 13, right? Guy Sensei said there was one selected this year with only two genin. Yes, we are. Naruto hummed. Wait, Lee looked at them with wide eyes, you've no third teammate. Why? Sasuke shrugged. The Hokage said so. Lee's eyes shone. Uchiha Sasuke, you are called a genius of your generation and I wish to fight you. You're called the best and I wish to see my abilities matched against you. I wish to see your flames of youth. Sasuke snorted. Genius is a relative term. And my answer is no. Not now, before an exam. Maybe another day, after the exams. Obito, we should go before we're late. Kakashi-sensei said not to be late. Naruto tore his gaze from the older genin and nodded. Let's go then, and plus Ama. He stole a glance at the others. Sorry, gotta go. Wish you luck and meet later. And with that, they hurried past, leaving three baffled genin behind. After all, there was not a single person in Konoha who didn't know the joint history of Uchiha and Senju. And these two, hailing from aforementioned opposing clans, had just called one another brother. Entering the examination room, the two were blasted by a wave of killing intent, courtesy of a few foreign shinobi, namely, shinobi from the newly formed village in the Land of Sound, Atogakure. Sasuke glared at them, flashing his sharingan in warning, and then proceeded to ignore them. Careful, who you treathin'? Someone said from next to them. Showing your eyes like that is a treat, after all. Sasuke scowled at the silver-haired boy who spoke. Of course it is. And you don't need to concern yourself with what I do and don't do. The silver-haired genin raised his hand. Calm down. I was just trying to give good advice. You're new this year, right? I've participated in these exams before. It's dangerous to treat others like that. Sasuke growled. As I say, do not concern yourself with what I do. Sasuke-kun. Someone shrieked suddenly. Sasuke looked up and a dreadful shiver passed him as he saw the blonde menace by the name of Yamanaka Ino. Sasuke-kun, I finally see you again. Ino said as she jumped into his neck, drawing many eyes to them. Sasuke growled even louder and shoved her off, none too gently. Ino stumbled back, her back colliding with Shinji. Stay away, fangirl. He hissed. Ino's eyes widened and she paled. Satisfied with her reaction, the Uchiha turned away. Sasuke and Naruto watched a fight which had broken out between a few sound shinobi and Kiba after the foreigners attacked Kabuto. Well, attack was a strong word, but they did provoke a fight. But then suddenly, a man walked in and released a blast of killing intent. Settle down, maggots. The man roared above the commotion. Find your seats now, before I throw you out even before the exam starts. Everyone gathered did as the man ordered and fell quiet. Satisfied with the results, the man's killing intent disappeared. Better. My name is Marino Ibiki and I will be the proctor of the first exam, which will entail filling out a test sheet. As Ibiki said that, a few Chunin took the papers from the desk and started distributing them among the seated Jonin, while Ibiki was writing something on the board. Now, there are some rules for this exam, and whomever breaks them will be immediately disqualified, along with their teammates. Alright maggots. Time's up, so put down your pens. Anyone found writing will be disqualified. The proctor announced after 2 hours. Sasuke closed his eyes and allowed his sharingan to deactivate as he placed his pen on the desk. As his eyes reverted back to normal, he felt the connection between him and Naruto snap loudly, like a chain breaking. He wondered how Naruto had managed to do this. Okay, so it wasn't Naruto alone. Naruto was hopeless when it came Genjutsu. Always has been. So he was sure that his brother kept chewing Kurama for the first 20 minutes of the exam to reach out to him. Then, when Kurama reached out to him trough a mind link courtesy of their special chakra, as well as his Sharingan Naruto linked their minds trough the use of his chains, channeling the smallest amount of Kurama's chakra. So whatever he saw with his Sharingan, Kurama also saw it, and the fox told Naruto what to write. It was very convenient that an undercover Chunin sat right next to him. In short, whatever he copied from the Chunin, Naruto could write it too, despite being a row behind him, 3 seats to his right. Turn your sheets. Ibiki instructed. Sasuke flipped it, so he now could only see the blank side of the paper. Now for the 10th and last question of the exam. Regarding how you answer this last question, you may proceed to the second round or lose all your points and never become Chunin. What? You can't be serious. Someone called from the back row. Ibiki glared at the genin, and the killing intent in the room spiked again, just like when he had entered. This is Myeksum, kid. Whatever I say will happen. So think carefully and remember that your choice affects your team. Leave and never become a Chunin or stay and hope you have enough points to proceed. Sasuke glanced backwards and their eyes met. Violet and Dot they won't leave. A madman was out there, much more dangerous than this man, a madman who wanted to resurrect their power-hungry and possibly mad non-human grandmother. If the seal broke and Otatsuki Kagaya Haim set her gaze on the world again. They would take this risk of not having enough points, no matter how unlikely that was, because if they walked away now, they would doom the world to destruction and slavery. He gave Antony nod to his brother, and Naruto nodded back. Their gazes shifted ahead again, waiting for the proctor to speak. Several other genin, however, decided against taking risks. Ibiki nodded and glanced at a paper on his desk. Numbers 10 and 26 are also disqualified. Along with numbers 11 and 4. The 2 teams left. Ibiki's gaze swept the room again. Any others who wished to leave? 3 genin stood up, fear in their eyes. Ibiki hummed. You're a team? Yes. The kunoichi standing answered. She wore a taki headband. Ibiki gestured to the door and the 3 genin slipped out with their heads hanging. Sasuke scowled inwardly. Cowards. Cowards who'll never be real shinobi because cowardice will always lurks in the heart of men and no matter what training they go trough, their very nature will not change. After the door closed, another long minute of silence followed, which unsettled many. As he stole a glance at Naruto, he saw his brother frown. No doubt, the negative emotions in the room were rising with every passing second. Congratulations to the remaining genin, you passed the test. What? Sasuke rubbed his right ear and glared heatedly at the Inuyasha boy. By the Shinju, Kiba was just as loud as he had been in the academy. Naruto was also excitable and loud sometimes, but never as loud as Kiba. How the boy hadn't gone deaf from his own voice yet. Inuyasaka's senses were sharper. After all, looking at Naruto, he saw the Uzumaki rub his own ears despite being farther from Kiba. But then again, Kurama's chakra gave the blonde sharper senses, on par with an Inuyasaka. Now that he thought about it, it all made sense. The test with the disguised participants and even this question. An elaborate little scheme to weed out the weak and hopeless. But how? What was the point of the 10th question? Sasuke glanced to his other side and found his pink-haired fangirl leaning forward. Oh, bye. She had been one of the smartest in class. How could she not figure it out? It was a test of skill and will. He said, drawing many eyes to himself. Information gathering, since the questions were not meant to be answered by us. Cheat to gather information. The 10th question was a test of will. The proctor's gaze flickered to him and the man gave a nod. Correct assumption. The test was made to cheat. There were people here who already knew the answer or had filled out sheets, or you were meant to cheat in other ways. Gather information and complete the mission. The last question was indeed a test of will. Suddenly, the window shattered and a purple-haired kunoichi flew into the room, dressed in mesh armor and a trench coat. She had a large banner behind her, which read the sexy and single Mitarashi Anko, proctor of the second exam. "You're early, Anko." Ibiki deadpanned. Anko's gaze swept the room critically. "There are much more remaining than in the previous exams we held, Ibiki. Are you going soft?" Ibiki shook his head. "No. They're just an exceptional bunch, Isupis." Anko turned away from her colleague to face them. "Alright brats, the second part of the exam will be in the Forest of Death, under my lead. Find your way there in 20 minutes or you're out of the game." "Did you notice her following us?" Naruto murmured as they tried slipping further into the commotion surrounding the Forest of Death. "Sure did." Sasuke murmured. His sensory prickled with the vile chakra of the Kusa Kunoichi, who started staring at them after leaving the academy building. "The chakra feels dark." "Vile," his brother said. "Makes me want to throw up my food." They stuck close together and maneuvered around the crowd, closer to the proctor, trying to lose the foreigner. "Alright brats. First and foremost, fill out the sheets that are being distributed," Anko said. "Why is that necessary?" Sasuke turned at the familiar voice. It was the Suna Kunoichi, the one who was on the same team as Gaara, Shikaku's host. And the Redeed, as if sensing his gaze, looked at him. Sasuke's eyes narrowed and he saw that flash in his eyes again. A mix of madness and fear. Oh, yes. Shukaku had arisen to fear them, especially Asura. He was sure that the blonde would give a piece of his mind to the Tanuki about how to and not to handle humans. "There will be deaths in this part of the exam," Anko answered. "The sheets are that you acknowledge that and take the risk. So, if anyone dies or ends up crippled for life, Konoha can't be held responsible." Sasuke shared a look with Naruto. Now that was an interesting approach. An exam to determine who were ready to advance on the power ladder, and they already spoke of death. But then again, violence was part of human nature, more so for shinobi than for anyone else. When the papers reached them, they filled out the form and gave it back. After about 20 minutes, Anko called for their attention again. "Now. Each team will get a scroll. It will be labeled either as Searth or Ashavan. To have a chance at passing this part, each team must have one Earth and one Heaven scroll and reach the tower in the middle of the forest within a week. This will cut your numbers in half, as you will have to fight each other for Asukan's scroll. Anyone who opens the scrolls before reaching the tower will be disqualified and sent home in disgrace. Also, those who lose Adium mate will also be forbidden from proceeding on to the next round. A week in there? And what of our food?" Naruto rolled his eyes and Sasuke almost snorted in amusement as the blonde mouthed a typical Akimichi question. "The forest is filled with animals and plants," Anko answered. "You can find everything for survival in there. Food included. However, those who are careless will be food themselves. Food to the forest." A large, bloodthirsty grin appeared on her face. "Once the gates open, you may begin." And then, she was gone in a swirl of leaves. A few minutes later, they got their own scroll heaven. So they would need to get an earth scroll before they could make it towards the tower. Naruto immediately sealed the scroll in asterisk seal so they wouldn't lose it. Then, when the gates opened with thunderous rumble, they leapt into the forest. No matter what, they would reach the tower in possession of both scrolls. They stopped on a high tree branch and watched the other genin teams pour into the forest from their carefully concealed spot. "So any plans, N plus Ama?" Naruto asked. "Survive, get a scroll and get to the tower in time," the Uchiha answered. The Jinchuriki deadpanned. "So to the point. Sasuke rolled his eyes. "I don't know yet. Maybe try confront a team and fight to get an earth scroll. Then, if we have it, we can focus on survival and getting to the tower. But, we also have to count on meeting a team who have a heaven scroll like we do. It would be acid back." His brother nodded in agreement. "Let's head towards the tower." If we meet others, we fight. If we don't have the scroll, by the time we reach the tower, we can still set a trap for other teams or just simply confront them. Fine. But actually, we could take out anyone who comes our way. Less people to worry about in the finals, then. Naruto nodded with a grin. Fine with me. They had been heading towards the middle of the forest when Sasuke detected it. After passing the same tree twice, he noticed it. The small fluctuation of chakra that usually meant genjutsu was in effect. He shared a look with Naruto, and the blonde gave a small eye roll, signaling that he had noticed as well. They decided to make another round in the illusion. Oten. Dochikaijo no Jutsu Earth Release. Underground Projection Fish Technique. Sasuke cleared his chakra, disrupting the illusion, just as Naruto turned to catch the attackers. His brother formed two sealess shadow clones to confront the other two. The attackers had aim headbands and wore pale yellow jumpsuits with rebreathers. How did you? Asked the one in the middle, with both of his eyes visible. You can't deceive a censor. Naruto said, jumping at the middle one. Sasuke raised his hand in a tiger seal and let loose a fireball as his brother knocked the other one unconscious. One of two, the one with a single eye visible, dodged the fireball and jumped at Sasuke. Sasuke, having no other choice, took on the aim genin in a short spar, soon overwhelming the other with speed. The fact that he could read the other's movements also helped. In less than 5 minutes, the three aim genin were tightly bound to a tree with Naruto's chakra chains, and Sasuke crouched down to search for their scroll. Predictably, the aim shinobi trashed against their bonds, trying to break the chains uselessly. Pounded. Sasuke said with a small grin. As he showed it to Naruto, both of them chuckled. It was just the one they needed. Earth. Naruto murmured. Wonderful. We can head for the tower. Sasuke nodded and they leapt into the trees again, ignoring the enraged calls of the other team in favor of getting out of the forest. Despite their best efforts, they'd spent the night in the wild after defeating the aim genin and taking their scroll. They had managed to catch hare for food, and Naruto had identified several plants and berries, which were used as seasoning. They rose with the sun and quickly cleared the evidence of their overnight stay. Naruto checked his storage seals, where their scrolls had been placed, but when he found them in place, they decided to hurry towards the tower. The sooner they got out of this place, the better. Naruto had mentioned that it had the lingering feeling of Mokuton, no doubt, from the Shodai's time, and despite the chakra romance, it still gave him an uneasy feeling. Sasuke had to agree. Something about the place just made him feel off. He'd always been a light sleeper, but he had barely had any shut-eye last night. They slowed when they reached a clearing, thinking for a second. Should they pass through fast and reveal their positions and possibly even walk into a trap, or should they go around the clearing to remain hidden? Their thought process was abruptly halted when they were hit by a powerful killing intent. They both whirled around, taking a step back, their eyes searching the greenery from where the chakra had hit. Fukuku, I found you too. An unknown voice hissed, you are talented for someone so young to keep avoiding me for so long, Sasuke-kun, Naruto-kun. The tall figure melted out of the shadows, pale-skinned, with yellow, snake-like eyes, wearing pale gray garbs and a large rope tied around his waist. The attire was completed by a kusa headband tied around the man's forehead. Although, if not for Naruto's heightened sensory, the blonde admitted to himself, he would have easily said that the stranger was Aman. Aman, or Aman, too tall, his chakra too powerful to be Ajinin. He was at least Ajinin. But what was a foreigner Jinin doing here, in the middle of their exam? Eyes narrowed, the boys took a step back. Who are you and what do you want? Naruto asked. What do I want? The Kusa shinobi asked. A smirk stretched across his lips. I want your furry friend, Naruto-kun. And I want the eyes that hold so much power. Then, the man jumped at them and Sasuke attempted to sweep at his legs, but the enemy jumped over it. Meanwhile, Naruto pulled his fist back to punch him. The man cogged it and gave a small grunt, his eyes narrowed. Your hit is strong, I give you that. The man kept his fist in his hand and swung his left for a hit. Naruto dodged, but the unknown shinobi was fast, so it still scraped past. Then, he felt Sasuke mold his chakra and without a word, flames sped towards them. Naruto tried sweeping off the enemy's feet under him, this also enabled him to avoid his brother's flames. The move hit, but the enemy burst into mud. Naruto cursed in the privacy of his mind, leaping back, standing back to back with Sasuke. Where was he? Left, right, above or below? The snake-like bastard emerged from the ground. Sasuke leapt upwards, no surprise, his brother had always been faster than him, but Naruto wasn't fast enough. The Kusanin dragged him into the ground. Sasuke released another fire jutsu at the enemy, while Naruto did his best to break the earth around him. Luckily, he managed to form his chakra chains, which were perfect for freeing him from the ground. Now sufficiently pissed at the unknown man, Naruto formed 4 seals. Half of the water he needed for the jutsu was created from his chakra and the other half was drawn from the air around him. He formed a great wave and sent it towards the snake man just as Sasuke finished molding his own chakra, releasing a blast of wind. Kimryoku. Fusui Rappa no Jutsu Cooperation. Wind Water Wild Wave Technique, they called it the same time. The jutsu caught the enemy, along with a few trees. The trees crashed loudly and the boys watched with some satisfaction. Ha! That unknown shinobi was tough and talented, but they had each other. They could work together and having such opposing abilities sometimes worked in their favor. The man stood up, his head bent in an unnatural angle, his face split by a large grin, which they could safely say, made him look mad. Kukuku, you are strong and talented to be able to work together like that, but you're still just genin. The man created a clone Ashido clone, which was Akanoha only technique. And ran at them, forcing them to split up. Naruto took on the clone, while Sasuke was left to deal with the original. The blonde grit his teeth in anger as the clone hit him. The strike was fast and precise, just like Indra's used to be. They'd seen it of course, but despite their best efforts, they were far from their old skills, hence why they preferred to work together these days. The strike sent him flying into a tree, and as he broke a tree bark, he felt a few of his bones break. Are you going to let him win? Asura Kurama snarled in his mind. Are you going to be an embarrassment to our father? Naruto slowly stood up as the clone darted closer. From the corner of his eye, he could see his brother fighting too, but it was obvious that the stranger was stronger than they were at the moment. Whatever this man was, he was toying with them and it grated at him. Either help me, so he does not win because it did clearly state he wanted both you and N plus Ama's sharingan or keep quiet, Kurama. I need to focus. He shot back at his non-human sibling. Because, even if Kurama was upset with them for what had happened in the past, he still considered the fox a sibling. The eldest of the bitch growled. Then, just this once, Ish'll aid you, so we both survive. And then, suddenly, chakra powerful, malicious and burning like fire flooded his body. He spiked his own chakra to contain the energy as a shred of boiling redness formed around his body. He crouched down as he felt his senses sharpening even more and he had no doubt that his eyes now resembled his fox brothers too. A single tail formed behind him, the chakra like a mini, orange shadow of the fox around him. Oh, so you're showing more of your power, aren't you, Naruto-kun? Ueryu, he growled, allowing Kurama's voice to overlap his as the second tail formed. He leapt at the enemy, closer to his old speed than ever before. Despite Kurama's chakra covering him, he was still mostly in control of his body. The chakra augmented his abilities, increasing his speed and strength, landing him a bit closer to what he had once been capable of achieving. But the clone was still fast. Fast and skilled enough to avoid most of his strikes, and then the frenzy of his fight was disrupted by a loud, blood-chilling scream. His eyes snapped over to the scene where his brother fought. The pale bastard's neck had enlarged and he'd bit Sasuke. He could feel the waves of sinister chakra coming from that direction, it was nothing like Kurama's. Kurama's was filled with rage and bitterness. This chakra was malevolent. Mad and sinister in a way he'd never thought a human's could be. Was the stranger a inhuman? On hurt his brother and got away with it. N plus Sama, he roared, his voice more like Kurama's than his own, and as his chains formed, rapidly shooting towards the clone, a wave of killing intent and scorching chakra left his body. The chains caught the clone and as the big chakra covered it, the clone dispersed in a plume of smoke. A third tail formed behind him, releasing more power and solidifying the chakra even more. He swiped a clawed hand, followed by a wave of chakra. It tore up the ground, rocking the forest. Sarutobi Hiruzen shivered when he felt the massive wave of killing intent coming from the forest of death. He looked out his window and cursed. Only one creature had such powerful and oppressive chakra. Naruto was in possession of two of the three known ways to control and contain akrature, like the Kikbi. Still, right now, the fox's chakra filled the air, filling his bones with dread. Something was wrong, very wrong. Anbu? With me and someone warn Yamato and Kakashi. We may need their help in containing the Bijk. He ordered as he disappeared in a swirl of leaves. The Hokage prayed to all the gods he could name that they would make it there in time. Sasuke could barely breath trough the pain, which seemed to course trough his body, like his own blood. Still, despite the pain, he was aware enough to see his brother or two of his brothers fight that thing. He refused to call their enemy human. He was too snake-like to be an actual human. Whoever their enemy was, he was no simple genin. Not if he could handle Naruto while using Kurama's chakra chains and claws flashing everywhere. And Naruto's jutsu were more destructive now, yet the man still seemed to be holding back. He was fighting more seriously now, but he was still holding back and despite that, stalling Naruto. Sasuke pressed his lips together. They had a lot of training to do if they ever wanted to get back their former power. Pain radiated from the bite on his shoulder. He dearly wished this battered gone so Naruto could have a look at whatever this abomination on him was. The chakra radiating from it, filling his body, was sickening. Powerful, but sickening. Suddenly, 7 chakra signatures appeared, cutting through the pain. He could identify Kakashi, Yamato and the Hokage. The other 4 were probably a squad of Anbu. Naruto landed on the ground snarling, the 3 chakra tails waving around him wildly. The forest around them was completely torn up due to Kurama's chakra and the jutsu that had been torn around. He was glad that despite using their big siblings' power, Naruto was still aware enough not to go on ability rampage. "Oh, it seems we're having company. It was nice meeting you too." The man's yellow eyes landed on him and Sasuke glared at the stranger with his sharingan. "I hope you'll enjoy my little gift, Sasuke-kun." Orochimaru. The sharp voice of the Hokage thundered just as the 7 people landed a few feet away. "Soon we'll meet again, Sarutobi-sensei, and then the leaves of your beloved tree will burn." The man Orochimaru hissed. Sasuke's eyes narrowed as his mind made sense of what he'd heard as the black-haired bastard sunk into the ground even as Naruto leapt at him, Kurama's chakra lashing out like massive claws, tearing up even more of the ground. Orochimaru. Sarutobi-sensei. By the Jibai's tales that had been Orochimaru of the Sannin. The most dangerous missing nin of the village. Okay, so maybe they hadn't been that bad if they had stalled the man long enough for the Hokage to arrive. The bastard was praised a genius, once even nominated for Hokage, before Naruto's father outshone him. True, it was very likely that Orochimaru had been toying with him, but still Naruto hadn't used Mokuton, and he hadn't shown the true capabilities of his Sharingan, either. Naruto roared and turned towards them, his eyes not his rather, the feral red slits of Kurama. Sasuke saw all of those present tense, and Kakashi raised his headband to reveal his Sharingan. He felt Yamato mold chakra as well, and he saw his hands turn into wood just as Kakashi's Sharingan spun and Kurama snarled. "Not Sharingan." He snapped at the Haddock, his own eyes activating. The adults looked at him as if he'd gone mad. He stood up just as Naruto's Kurama's eyes landed on him. Indra. The fox snarled. Sasuke took a step closer. "Let him go. We both know he's too tired to suppress your chakra even with his abilities. Let him go, Kikbi." "Why should I?" Sasuke rolled his eyes. "I may not be in Uzumaki, but that's the Shikifujin. A contract with the Shinigami is not something that can be escaped. Not by me. Nor by Asura. Or you. Let my brother go. I could just kill you now." Sasuke shook his head as he took another step closer, ignoring the pain in his body. The fucker surely hit hard and the seal whatever it was wasn't helping either. And revenge would not get you anywhere. In fact, you would seal your own fate. We're here Tostafum. If you stop me from helping Obito, you will end up used like before. Like in the valley. Or 12 years ago. Besides, if you tried killing me you'd be going back on your own word." The fox snarled. "Watch your mouth, Tsuki no Urashi lunar diviner." Sasuke raised an eyebrow. He had not heard that moniker in ages. He didn't even remember how he came to have it. He remembered though that it was because of his eyes. Because of the Sharingan's predictive properties. He remembered that at the dawn of time, those who knew little of chakra and even less about him and his family thought he could see the many possibilities the future held. "Or what will you do?" The chakra flickered and Naruto's eyes turned back to their natural violet. Sasuke relaxed as he felt the Mokuton rise to the surface and tamper down the fox's influence. "Obito. You should not rile him up so much, and plus Ama." Naruto murmured, his voice his own, despite the shroud of orange still covering him. "He should know better than to try to break the seal when you wanted a way out of something messy. Besides, I have nothing to do with that mess this time." Sasuke pointed out as he took another careful step towards him. "You always have a hand in such things." The fox snarled, taking control for another moment. "All your kin are as mad as you are." "My kin are gone now, fox," he said coolly. "Only Obito remains." "Enough now, furball." Naruto growled, his chakra rising again. "The madman's gone, so you might as well go back to sleep and stop trying to break the seal, or the Shinju help me." The grass around Naruto grew as his Mokuton acted up again, and Sasuke swore he also heard the soft rattle of chains. The last traces of the orange chakra all flickered out and Naruto fell to the ground with a groan. Sasuke staggered over to him and fell next to him. "Are you alright, Obito?" he asked, his dark eyes searching his brother's gaze, just a little bit fretful. Naruto gave a breathless laugh as he leaned against his side. "I should be asking you that question, and plus Ama. That abomination with you." Sasuke grunted. "Yeah. Some form of Kinjutsu, so maybe you could have a look at it later. The chakra inside the seal has settled now, but it's just under my skin. I hate using power so vile and most of all, I hate using power that I had not paid a price for." "Naruto." "Sasuke." Kakashi called, walking closer. His face was still tight with worry, his eye remaining uncovered. Sasuke rose to his feet slowly, dragging his brother with him. "We're fine. Mostly." Naruto hummed. "Yeah. We have an exam to finish. No way I'm losing this, after all Phizimus. We meet later, Kaka-sensei." Then, even before any of those present could stop them, they were gone from the clearing with a shunshin. They had the scrolls and now they would just have to stumble their way through the forest, despite their exhaustion. It shouldn't be too hard. The boys staggered into the Namika's apartment, relived. They still had time to spare. They'd completed their task and reached the tower in 4 days. This was the 4th day and they had already been waved off to rest. Sasuke leaned against the wall next to the door as Naruto hurried further into the house. "We'll get that abomination off of you, and plus Ama," he called. Sasuke heard as Naruto gathered his belongings and something crashed by the Shinju. Freaking. And he huffed, half annoyed, half amused. His brother was still clumsy. He was tired. Whenever he had to use chakra, he also had to combat the malevolent influence of whatever the seal on him was. It was more draining than he would have liked. But then again, they'd faced a Sannin and still made it to the tower with time to spare. Perhaps once Naruto was done with the removal of his seal, he could sleep. After about 15 minutes, Naruto was back. "Sasuke?" his brother asked, placing a hand on his shoulder. The Uchiha jolted awake, his eyes narrowing, chakra crackling under his skin. He relaxed when he realized it was Naruto and grunted. Shit, this thing was really draining to resist if he was falling asleep while standing. Naruto's violet eyes were shining with concern, one of his eyebrows arched. "Are you alright?" Sasuke shook his head. It was pointless to lie to his brother. Naruto could tell when he was lying, besides, the blonde was also good with medical things. He surely noticed the signs of his creeping exhaustion. "No. It's tiresome to resist that thing, and my head wants to split in half. That persistent whispering, surely the seal's work, is driving me mad." "Whispering, you say?" he grunted, annoyed. As he opened the door, Naruto threw a hand around him and helped him out of the house. "Yes. Why?" The blonde growled and some killing intent leaked from him. "That's bad. It means he has some form of connection with you. He's in your head, in a way, and probably wants to use things against you. Like a fucking Yamanaka." The Uchiha spat. "No. Even worse. Get that thing off." The Uzumaki gave him a look. "I will. Promise. It will take time, and since he's in your head, in a sense, you'll have to fight him off. The seal's just meant to help." "Noted. We'll need space for this. Can we go to the Uchiha grounds?" Sasuke nodded. "If it's space you need," he murmured, "fine. The training ground should be fine. Come on," he said, taking the lead while still somewhat leaning on the blonde. Naruto drew the symbols across the place. A single mistake and it will either blow up or the seal will burn out his brother's soul. Not a nice sort of death. He wasn't even sure this will work the way he intended it. After all, he had no idea what the seal the Sannin used was for. It was a seal he'd never seen before, so he was sure it was not among the older Genjutsu. It was probably something new or kami forbid, something the snake had invented himself for the Shinju knows what purpose. Of course, while seals were versatile, their use literally endless, as long as the user had the right knowledge of the subject and enough chakra to power the seal, the basic principles were all the same. The basic principles his father and uncle had created, the ones he had worked around, mastered and reworked. And it seemed, his kin had done the same after him and Indra had died, and now, he had a larger variety of seals to work with than before. But sometimes, one must go back to the roots. Having studied the Uzumaki scrolls left by his parents, coupled with his knowledge from a time long past, Naruto was sure he could remove the seal from Sasuke. It might not be easy, but it will work. Failure was not an opinion. He would not let the snake have any hold on his brother. The ink painted the dusty ground black. The mix of his blood and chakra made the seal even stronger. It was an intricate circle, with 6 arrow-like additions pointing outwards. The arrows were full of symbols, and the myriad of characters swirled into the center, creating a smaller circle. He grunted when he was done. He could already feel the drain on his reserves. "The seal is done. Take off your shirt and sit in the middle," the blonde said, gesturing at it. Sasuke shed his vest and shirt, dropping on the ground, and then he walked into the circle, careful not to ruin the fine patterns his brother had been working on for hours. He settled in Kakufuse in the middle, waiting for Naruto. Naruto dipped his brush into the mix of ink, blood and liquefied chakra. When he was satisfied, he walked over to Sasuke and drew another series of symbols on his skin, most of them centered around the black circle of the unwanted seal. Hand on the ground, palm pressed down. "I need a contact between the seal and the part on your body," he instructed. Sasuke threw him a curious look, but did as instructed. Naruto carefully did a few linking kanji, the writing running down his brother's arm, to flow onto the ground and into the rest of the seal. His gaze quickly analyzed the fine drawing, and when he found no mistakes, he jumped out. He grabbed a storage scroll he'd brought and unsealed 6 candles, placing one in each point of the seal, lighting each one with a spark of chakra. Sasuke watched him work quietly. "It's going to hurt," Naruto murmured. "I thought you better know." Sasuke nodded. "Somehow, I had a feeling you would say something like that. But, it's okay. If it gets this thing off me, I'll bear it." "A seal you say?" the Hokage asked, looking at Kakashi and then at Tenzo. His expression was a mix of worry and wariness. Whatever his former student has cooked up now, Sarutobi knew it didn't bode well for anyone. And the fact that the snake summoner has targeted the 2 most promising genin since Kakashi didn't help ease his worries either. "I believe so," the Mokuton user affirmed. "We'd seen Sasuke trying to cover it up as they left the tower. It might have to do something with Orochimaru's presence." The Sandame's lips twisted. "We best seek the boys then and fast. Orochimaru has always been way too interested in those with special ability sharingan, Mokuton or chakra chains, it mattered not. I fear what might he have done to Sasuke," he said, standing up. The 3 shinobi shared a look before they were gone in swirling wind and leaves. Naruto sensed when the Hokage and their senseis arrived, and by the way his brother was looking, the 3 senior shinobi were right behind him. But right now, the blonde could not bring himself to worry about explanations. Surely, the 3 noticed the complexity of the array, which Sasuke was sitting in the middle of. But he'll deal with their questions later, once Sasuke was safe. He slammed his hand on the ground, right into the smeller shiki at his feet, which was connected to Sasuke's sealed Kenjutsu. Saishin Kumsoku. Jikunajimka sealing technique. Spirit restraints. Evil purification. As he channeled his chakra into the seal, the reddish black lines lit up in a soft, orange light, and the candles he had placed in each point blazed brightly. The light from Theshiki rapidly crawled through the symbols, and soon, Sasuke's own body was alight with chakra. As his brother screamed, Naruto could only flinch, pray to the kami that this would be worth his blood and Sasuke's pain. When Sasuke opened his eyes, the burning from his skin was gone, but the electric prickling remained. He didn't need to wonder much where he was. For some reason, he had been tossed into his own mindscape. But then again, Naruto had warned him he would have to deal with the seal on his own, in a way. Perhaps that was what his brother had meant. As he looked around, he noted with dull satisfaction that his mind reflected his past life more than the present. He found himself in a familiar clearing, trees circling everything, the great mountains in the distance. The night was clear above his head, the silver crescent of the moon shone like a beacon of hope through the dark. In front of him stood the old Otatsuki compound. The one which his Mkamisitsa had sallowed whole after their father's death. "That's right." Avis hissed behind him. It was vaguely familiar, but still distorted, so he could not place it. "You killed them. You killed them all." He whirled around to face the source of the voice, and he found himself. It was like looking into a mirror, not in the way, like all those years ago, after the massacre. No. This was a literal mirror. The one who stood opposite him was himself. The only differences were, perhaps, the cruel yellow eyes and the sneer on the lips. "Who are you?" Sasuke demanded coldly, even though a part of his mind already knew the answer. But no, it could not be. He had dealt with those shadows already, had he not? "I'm you." The reflection spat. "Your dark side. The darkest part of your soul. The part that wants Asura dead for taking your birthright. The part that wants Itachi dead for the bloodbath all those years ago." Kakashi's single eye was wide as he darted closer to the massive seal. It was such a complex thing. He was sure Kushina-san and Minato-sensei would have been proud of Naruto if they could see what the genin has done. Again, were his students even genin at this point, he might vote for them to be prompted to Jimin. "What are you doing, Naruto-kun?" the Hokage asked. The blonde Senju Uzumaki stole them a glance. "Removing that abomination that the snake has left behind. The fucker had bitten N+Sama when we fought. I didn't know what Kenjutsu he twisted into that freakish thing, but it's not sting." Naruto frowned. "But it was hard to do. And by how much chakra I have already used, the moment Sasuke wakes up, I'll be out cold with chakra exhaustion. Perhaps Sasuke too." The blonde's violet eyes landed on him, and Kakashi couldn't help but recall his earlier musings. Was living 2 lives possible? Because if it was, that would explain why Naruto and Sasuke were so different from those their age. They were grown men, stuck in the bodies and with the limits of young teens. "What is it, Naruto?" he asked, sensing that the blonde wanted to speak. "Mind taking us home after this? Please?" Kakashi hummed. "Not at all. But Minato-sensei's house. I left the old blood samples in the seal." The blonde cut him off. "You can still go in. But don't make me regret trusting you, sensei." Kakashi felt a chill run down his spine as the blonde's gaze sharpened at the end of his sentence. "Minato-sensei's dangerous look, alright. I have no intention of breaking your trust, Naruto-kun." Sasuke glared at his shade. I've left those things behind a long time ago. Have you would ask. If you have left it behind, why am I here? We're in your mind and I'm here, Sasuke. You're here because of that seal. But that seal is about to be removed. Obito will deal with it. Will he? Why would he do a favor to the man who's killed him? You killed your own father. You killed him. The Uchiha grit his teeth and spat at the monster in front of him. I killed him once. But we have made up since. We're brothers now. Brothers, huh? And Uchiha and Senju the reflection snorted. Besides, why would he forgive you the killing of his father? He's too loyal to family. Sasuke smirked at the slip-up. Loyal. That's what he is, loyal to friends and family. His parents in this life had been dead already, the work of Madara. And Autumn-sama was already dead by the time I incinerated the compound. It didn't kill them. Still it snarled, you are Uchiha and Senju. Always at each other's throats. Besides, he'd stop you from pursuing your revenge against Itachi. Sasuke snarled, his eyes morphing into the mangyeko sharingan inside his own mind. He had no limits, like in the outside world. Out there, his body was that of a 12-year-old. In here, he was as much a 12-year-old as much a man grown. Equal part Sasuke and Indra. We swore an oath. And Itachi can rot in the deepest, darkest, most painful corner of Mugen Tsukiyomi, for all I care. He drew his tantman, the blade lit up with orange light. Now begging from my mind, snake spawn. The sword drew an elegant, deadly arc of orange, and even before the shade could react, the steel cut it in half. The moon shone brighter and suddenly, the orange-black lines of the seal appeared on the clearing. Sasuke smiled as he caught the meaning of a few symbols. Peace. Protection. Hope. Strength. Yes. That was what the snake-eyed bastard didn't know about him. That he lived for Asura, for their shared dream of safety and peace, and not for revenge. He smiled softly as he sheathed his weapon again. Arigato, Asura-chan. He murmured good-naturedly. Here, the blonde could not hear, so he could not whine about being way too old to be called Chan. Kakashi saw the seal's lines dull. As the light dulled, the dark lines turned lighter and lighter until they were just barely visible on the ground. Sasuke. Naruto murmured before he passed out. A moment of panic took over Kakashi at that. Naruto was a literal walking chakra battery. How much chakra did that thing take? His single eye darted over to Sasuke. As the Uchiha's eyes opened, he saw the red of his sharingan. Then, as the ninjutsu faded, the candles, which had burned brightly until then, were suddenly snuffed out as one by an invisible hand. Kakashi walked closer. Now that the seal had faded, he could actually approach Sasuke without killing the Uchiha himself or potentially both of them. Arigato, Asura-chan. Sasuke breathed before his own eyes fluttered closed. Both his students were unconscious, claimed by exhaustion, but Kakashi could not move to help them. He just stood above Sasuke, staring at the Uchiha. His words had been soft, a mere breath on the wind, yet Kakashi has heard it. Sasuke has called Naruto Asura, just like the summons had done 2 weeks ago. Why? And that marks the end of the second part of the story. If you guys made it this far and want more contents like this, comment down below to let me know. Thanks for sticking out till the end. I would gladly appreciate every likes, comments and subscribes I could get on the series. It only takes a minute, and best of all, you can show your support for absolutely no cost. See you in the next one.